Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Drawing Down the Dragon. I'm Snappy, and thank you for joining me. Today we are interviewing my dear friend Leslie. How are you, Leslie?
Good. Should I turn it? Is that am I
Oh no,
sideways?
that's fine. We'll go
Okay.
like this, and I
There
think
you go.
that'll make it
There
all the
you
better.
go.
Right. I just gotta adjust my chair. I'm just so
I'm
used to doing
good.
my tarot, so
It's a happy feast day. Here in Mexico it's the Dia de Guadalupe. And
that's
that's
so beautiful. And
Tonantzin, the mother goddess, yeah.
right. And we were just saying too, right? It's the second day of the Saturnalia, Yo Saturnalia, and it is the Opalia, the festival to Ops, the great mother, right? So it is a mother festival on both sides of the
Yeah,
globe
coming
here.
up on the solstice and yeah.
Right? It's such a powerful time. Like we were just talking about this because you have been writing a book or a series of books, I should say. You finished one book and you kind of in between writing another one last time
That
we
we
chatted.
started and
Right.
then as will happen, see that's what happens. I've been doing this a while, and the thing is, when the muses tell me to do something, I have to do it. And
Right.
not because I'm scared, but because I'm familiar with the results when I don't do it. And I'm also familiar with the results when I do it. So I know what the difference is, and they're pushing me really hard. And so there's
Mhm.
another step that I have to relocate before they gave me the start of it just as a teaser, and now they're like, now you have to take a big step, and then we're going to give you the rest in a different environment. And so I am going to take my 85-year-old dad with Alzheimer's and two cats, two carry-ons, and four suitcases to Crete
I love it. You're
to
such
live the
you're
life that
super
basically
wild.
we're living here, right?
Right.
But the spirits told me to come here, and there was a hurricane, and and but something opened up in my creativity, so I benefit. They send me here to do, there's a spirit that does geomancy through me. They send me to do work, and they send me to receive inspiration. And
Mhm.
so when I got back from the recon trip to Greece, can we live here, right? Then they boom gave me a teaser, this is the start of the book, and then they cut it off and they're like, now relocate, and I'm going, are you fucking kidding me right now? And then they laugh, and there's a lot of them, so it's like just studio canned laughter, right, when they laugh, and I'm like, okay. So for me that means I have to get all this stuff in a car, drive to a train station, do a 5-hour train ride, and then stop and rest for a day because that's all dad can handle. Then he can only do direct flights, so I fly direct to Paris, stop, get a room that takes cats, right, couple nights, sit, come down, and then get it all back in the tin can and fly from Paris to Chania because those are the only direct flights. And then
Right.
I get a place where we can chill out for the winter and look around for a more permanent situation. And all of that I can cobble together, one step at a time, except for this one. I have to sell 15 sessions to get the plane tickets. And so there's
Remind
just
me what your email
sometimes
is. Remind me what
when
your email is so we can at least share it with our
when a
audience.
girl's got to work, and then she can go
Right.
back to the inspired, delirium of like receiving the transmission, because sometimes it takes all day to get a page.
Right. I
And so,
understand.
yeah, that's the thing. If you've ever thought of having a session with me, or gifting a session to someone else, or hiring me to do some ghost busting, which I also do, my email is the same as my PayPal. It's LESLIE dot SELENE at yahoo.com. And that's me. I'm a full-time witch. That is what I do. I'm basically a working artist, and I work gig to gig. So I make a modest living. Ain't nobody getting rich over here. And
Right.
and uh and I gotta do this. I gotta do this like complete reality shift, and then I can get back to writing the book, because receiving it is a very big deal. And I also got to a point in the story where I'm gonna have to know more than I know now to go forward.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
we should talk to people a little bit about the story because okay, so this is how in some well we bonded first over our love for Ammon and his wild character.
Yeah.
And then we further bonded over our shared interest in King Numa of all things, right? In the
Well, I
related
didn't
mythology.
know about King Numa. You know, I lived in Italy for 9 years, and
Right.
this is the center of goddess worship of the Western world, and you never see Jesus. Every time you turn around, Mary is on every street corner. There's some
Yeah.
like weird little window with a candle, and there she is again. You can't turn around, right? But you have to go hunting around. You have to go inside the church to see Jesus. And the same thing is true of the ancient history. Rhea Silvia is everywhere. You can't go to Italy without seeing Rhea Silvia and hearing that story. But King Numa, I didn't hear his name mentioned once in the whole 9 years I was there. And not really a whole lot of other kings either. There's
Right.
Romulus, there's Remus, and then there's Caesar, and somewhere there's Augustus,
Augustus. Yeah. Oh,
and
so
that's
they
it.
just they jump, right? You have
Right?
you have the foundation,
It's
then there's this king period that everyone forgets about. Then there's
yeah,
the Republican,
yeah.
the
But Rhea
glorious Republic.
Silvia, I heard multiple versions
Right.
of the legend of Rhea Silvia. And since I'm a medium, what I do is I drop in. I'm trying to feel around for the ancestor, because if there's the ancestor, then I'm gonna know it's gonna have that vibration of ancestor. And when I was living there and hearing a version of the legend, I was like, is it so? And I went to the spot, and then boom, and she starts talking to me. And so I knew at least this one version of the legend was true. Often many versions of the legend are true. This is how I got introduced to Ammon. Is I was like kind of hush hush about my realization that there were many different Christs and many different Magdalens. These were titles. I'm not
Right.
talking about one individual. And then my godmother called me up and she said, "Hey, this guy's saying the same thing, only he has proof." So I like having proof. I'm a medium. I get super woo, but I like having proof. And so I get an intuition or I get a page of the book coming in. I'm gonna go look it up and fact check every last thing. And so you guys were talking about Hesia on the site, and then you started talking about the Vestal Virgins, and Rhea Sylvia was once talking about Rhea Sylvia. And I start weeping, and I remember my promise to her 30 years ago. I told her I would tell her story eventually. And at the time I had a baby and all that stuff.
Right.
And so and so I start crying, and here she is. Whoo, 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 she's on me like white on rice, right?
Yeah.
And then you start talking about Numa, and I'm like, who's Numa? And then you sent there's only like a page, we only have a page or two about him anyway, but there's so much in those pages.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's because like when it's Numa's one of these characters who's real and fake at the same time, right? Like we have his house,
What
we
I
know
realize
he
is that
established
he and Rhea Sylvia, they live on an event horizon in between history and mythology.
exactly.
And we bridge this with archaeology somehow.
Exactly. Right. So it's really hard because we're dealing with a really, really remote like he's more real than Romulus, but it's still like how real. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And they've utilized what ends up happening within the mythos for Numa is he becomes, and what it really intrigued me for him. Okay, so
Mm.
I should explain how I got into this.
Yeah.
So my whole quest for a long time, first I was about after growing up, I had become very deeply, deeply Christian. And then I had a break with this and I had a radical self realization. And part of my problem was I had gone so far into that extreme, I had cut myself off from so much of reality. And so I needed, what I wound up doing was I was like, okay, I want to explore violence and evil, right? But in its most tangible form that I could find in the Western tradition that I understood. And I came to Saturn, to that force. But when I started exploring Saturn, right, that violence is very surface level And what I wound up finding was the duality of that image. There is no Saturn without Rhea, right? And Rhea takes me to Rhea Sylvia, takes me to Hestia, and takes me to this, what I call like the primal red goddess. You know, I do believe in there are many, many, many goddesses, but there is this spark, that hearth, that fire, that, you know what I mean? That Hestia, that fire goddess, to me, that mother home goddess it's a special force, and it is a
The
very primal force.
numbers are a
You
thing.
know?
One is female.
Right.
Two is male and female.
Exactly. You got it.
Three is female and non-binary. And here we go. And you can't have a magical system without all the numbers up
Right.
to
Right.
12, 18, take your pick. Yeah.
Right. But you said it. One, exactly. One is Hestia, but it's, you know, that energy also has a masculine side to it. It's Saturn Rhea, right? It's
Depends
that
on
it's
what you feel
intensity.
is masculine. I mean, in a certain sense, male violence got nothing on
Yeah. Right.
female rage.
Right. No,
It's
for
just
sure.
the dosage, you
You
know.
know, but it's that thing where she's both the spark and the hearth, right, combined as a central image. So she's
This is
Prometheus,
fundamental. This is
Promethea,
fundamental to
right?
being human and not being another species. Is we have this thing that can
Right.
totally kill us overnight while we're sleeping,
Right. But I
which
got
we
so
also can't live without come morning. So if we don't know how to grapple with this potentially a life or death situation, we don't get to be alive. It's really,
right.
really
So,
fundamental.
you know, Hestia, this goddess, you know, Rhea Sibylle kind of energy here. This, these mother goddesses have been sending me on a wild journey
Yeah,
for a
man.
while,
Double deep.
for several years now.
That's
And
again, all right.
what ended up happening with me is eventually it took me to Hestia, which was about finding this primordial city and finding the ancient Pelasgians.
Hmm.
And then I started looking into all these foundation myths. And you find her at the heart of all these foundation myths. And that took me to the Roman foundation myth. And at the same time, while I'm looking at this, Ammon posed a challenge, which was about finding the secret name of Rome. And so this was like the muse shooting a firebolt and into my brain. It seemed like everything in my life was lining up, and I became like I hadn't been that obsessed about a question in a long time. And then I found the answer, and it was like a confirmation of what I'd been doing for the last several years, you know. And it was the beginning of now I have a very deep, you know, it's interesting because I have like a deep relationship now with the muse, and I speak with her, but not in a verbal way. You know, it's almost always through the spirit of inquiry and through books,
Yes.
but sometimes in dreams and sometimes in feelings,
Yeah.
but almost always through me reading something. You know, and but it's gotten to the point where it's now full on like conversations
Yeah.
in mid book. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
You know, but it's been this wild magical experience. And when I was getting into her, you know, and finding I found that foundation story, and after finding the name, there's all this stuff too. What Numa became in that story, and when I realized what Numa is the hierophant. He is the ideal priest, right? And that's what he's supposed to teach you. He teaches you how to connect to the. He's an
He's the
allegory
alchemist,
for,
yeah, and
yeah,
he's Parsifal also.
right, and
Very,
he's the ideal
very
king.
much the prototype of Parsifal.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's just such a beautiful story, you know? And it's like, you can see also how it could be true, right? You have a person whose wife dies, and so they become a monk, basically, go off
Yeah,
into the woods,
yeah,
right? And then they dedicate themselves to their religion. And
yeah.
back then, you had to get remarried. So, how does Numa get out
Well,
of
yeah,
getting
and there's
remarried? He
no
marries
way he
the
wasn't an
goddess,
initiate.
right? No,
Right.
of course he was.
So the like unspoken parenthesis is, and when he was off in the woods, this happened, which is kind
Yes.
of a big deal and takes about a year, at
Yeah.
least.
a year. Well, this is the thing, is like there's all this stuff
And
that,
who would he have gone to? Is
there's all
now
this
I look at
stuff.
it that way
Right.
in retrospect. But right then I'm chatting with you guys. I start crying. And here comes
Right.
the words. And the words come. I was fine.
Yeah.
I was fine. I was fine. And until I write them down, she's gonna be on me like that. And I write it down. I was fine. And then I get the next line. And then get the next line. And then I get the next line. And then I give them an appointment. I say, okay, I'm coming, every morning at this time, so they don't keep me up all night, man. Because this is not my first rodeo. And you can, if you want, you can just stay up all night for 3 months and they'll keep talking. But no, I have to give it a lane for my health, and like I have other things to do. So I tell them I'm available from this time to this time, and they just keep coming until they stop.
Right.
And then what I do after I get a page is I go look it up and fact check it and make sure that I'm not full of shit. I didn't make that up. And usually I find out, oh, that I had no way of knowing that. And here it is.
Right. And so you channeled the spirit of Numa and wound up writing this entire Becoming Numa book.
It's three voices. And so I get a page, their voices are very different in my ear.
Mhm.
And I get Rhea Sylvia, and then I get Muta, and then I get Numa. And then I get Rhea Sylvia, and then I get Muta, and then I get Numa for 3.5 months. And then Papu is finito. And then I didn't really know that there was a second book until the last page when I hear this has been book one, and I'm like, oh no. Like I could have been done even, right? And then
Right.
I realized at some point they're gonna like do the second book. And then so part of it is like I have to now go figure out if I can live in Greece. And so we take the test trip. Dad, I mean he was completely nuts before the Alzheimer's, okay? Like this is specialist every step of the way. Can we hang? Yes, we're gonna hang. Then I come back and boom, second book starts. So the book two is La Ninfa. Book one is La Lupa, and these are the major feminine goddess influences in Numa's life as he develops into someone who has sovereignty, someone
Right.
who can be king. And this is, I realized later, much later, this is basically the task before us. Like the whole wide world needs
Yeah.
to grow the fuck up right now.
Become
We are
mature.
all dysfunctional. We're not, I'm not
Right.
speaking to, people who are younger. We're all this, and we need to grow up. And these are historically the ways that we do that, through this kind of love, through this other kind of love. And I guess there's probably a book three, because that's the kind of symmetry that we're working with.
Right. And Numa's just such a wild character, because like takes the vow of silence for 5 years before he even meets the goddess. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
um,
It's
when he
purist. Yeah.
does meet the goddess, he marries her. He doesn't just become a worshiper; he marries her and calls her his wife,
Yeah.
invites her into his home.
I can
Like
relate
this
to
is
that. My mother married her guru. She married a Catholic priest when I was 7 years old, and it was fine. Actually, it was a great marriage. So occasionally, something makes up for the power imbalance that would
right.
otherwise be totally a toxic thing. Like, there's a reason you're not supposed to date your professor or the
Right.
person who
Right.
initiates you. This is it's really
Yeah.
serious, and but occasionally, in their case, my mom was much younger, but much more streetwise. Like he basically lived in the cloister his whole flipping life, so he was a little bit like a teenager sometimes. And so they both had this thing where they were both young and old at the same time.
Right.
And so if they had problems, it wasn't because of that. You know what I mean? Occasionally, and
Absolutely.
I think that's what happened with Numa and Egeria,
Right.
is
Right.
he
I
wasn't going to
also
find
think
an
like
equal match because he already had this bounty
absolutely.
on his head of potentially being the next emperor.
Well, this is the thing with Numa is you have to. I see him. I see everything through the lens of tarot. So I have to see
Yes.
Numa through the lens of
Yeah.
tarot, and I
And
see
he's a
him as,
fool in a lot of ways.
oh yeah, but he's walking the lover's path,
That
right? The
is the
lover's
same.
path is the alchemical wedding, and you have to
Yes, yes,
commit to the muse, go
yes.
through the process of divine invitation to
And
become
I have
like
seen this
her,
in practice
right?
that occasionally it helps to have a partner who lives on the other side of the veil. The dead
Right,
wife matters in this equation
right, right. Well,
because he's a heavenly bridegroom. He's got a lover who lives on in another
well,
realm,
it's
right?
also this magical allegory, and it's also, it's the path of Attis, right? It's the
Yes.
path of Attis. It is
Yeah.
that, or Bacchus in adoration of Venus. It's this idea where, you know it's that hyper masculinized version of the path to the stars, where it is the masculine is supposed to shed all their masculinity by going through this process of radical loving adoration, and then they transition into the goddess, they
Right.
rise to the stars,
And it
you know
matters that the female initiations are things like wrestling bears and shooting deer naked
exactly,
and,
right. And
and
the male
dismembering men
initiation
naked
is
in the woods.
feminizing, right?
So yeah,
Yeah,
there's a like the Zen training looks for this kind of balance. Like they get a martial artist
exactly.
and they make him do the fan dance, and they get a flower arranger and they make her do jujitsu.
Well,
And so we're
so
looking
much.
for some sort of balance or at least fluidity enough to be able to choose.
I always think about these things from a practical mythological standpoint. When I'm looking at the myths, I go, okay, as a practicing witch, right? As someone who's going to be training and working
Yes.
with people in the practical world, how are these myths actually going to be utilized? And
Yes.
so that's what immediately I try to focus upon. When I look at like Attis, I see it as a parallel to the Kori, to Persephone. The extreme masculine versus the extreme feminine. We've talked about this,
Yeah.
but it's like we see this on this. If you follow these paths, you become a whole being. If you find yourself in that hyper masculinized realm and you go down the path of Attis, at the end, you reform the divine energy. If you're
Yes.
in that Persephone hyper feminine, if you go through the fall and have to confront the beast, all of a sudden you find yourself this whole person. You've reformed the divine energy, right? That's the whole
It
process,
forges the identity, and
right?
also that's where you find out who you are.
Exactly, right? And you become your true self. What I see with Numa is his commitment to the muse, and giving up his ego and allowing her to speak through him, not made him a king. And it was also that it was divine imitation. He was walking that path of Attis on the earth, right? He's that ideal hierophant, you
Yes.
know?
And we know that contrary to other systems, the African diaspora is the
Mm,
opposite.
right.
In Western magic, we know if he was initiated, this was a path involving sex,
Yeah.
drugs, and guitar music.
All of the
This
above and more.
this happened to him via these
Yeah,
these gateways, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting because one of the things, like, well, it's also, it's both through it, so much of these paths are about denial of pleasure and then the experience of pleasure, and we see this hyper mythologized within the myth of Numa. So one of the things that Numa does is he commits to living the austere monastic life even after he's elected king, right? He doesn't have any nice stuff. He refuses. He says he wears the wool of the shepherd,
Yeah, but
which
here's
makes
where I
him,
have to interject and be like, okay, my son and me both are autistic ADHD.
right.
And I'm sorry, but there's no fucking way he's not. Like
He's clearly, yes, but
he's
there's
special.
also,
He's short bus, yo, for
yeah,
sure.
but
After
there's,
school
yeah,
special.
absolutely. Like most monastics are some form of neurodivergent. Like, otherwise, how are you going to thrive in that
He's a fucking
atmosphere?
weirdo. He leaves home because he can't hang because he's
Right.
overstimulated and he cannot even
But
remotely.
there's
And he
also
only
there's
comes
also
back if
a
they give him the accommodations
for
where he
sure.
gets some quiet time and
But there's also this high morality, and there's also, we see
yeah,
this like in the left-hand path in general. If
yeah,
you look at the Indian tantrikas, extreme removal of
yeah.
all pleasure, and then the indulgence in extreme forms of pleasure in a ritualized focus. And we
Well,
see
and
this with
just
Numa.
look at people saddled with that monarchical thing today. Do they have an even harder time figuring out who they are? Yeah, they do.
Right?
Because everybody's laying this big heavy trip on them. And so not only was he probably ADHD and autistic, but he also was having this big heavy trip laid on him, which he couldn't be dishonest. See, that's the thing about the autism piece. He couldn't be dishonest about the fact that he was in no way adequate to even begin to talk about that, right? Like,
Right.
are you kidding me, right?
But like in one of my favorite of the stories, so one of the things that Numa does is he says, he chastises everyone and says, part of the problem why Rome will always be corrupt is because you guys are always indulgent. And he goes, where I choose to live like the ancestors and eat nothing but grain and water. And I am fulfilled on grain and water. But this is
Because
not
the
the
goddess
whole, yeah,
tradition took him through all this
yeah,
fasting and shit, and they taught him how to find out who he is. But also,
right.
he's a saving. That's different.
Yes. It doesn't
This is
end there either.
already like some kind of royal marriage situation
Oh,
to,
yeah.
to get the clans, hanging
Well,
out.
that's why he's elected, right? He's not elected because he was a great figure. He was elected because he was related to the. They saw
Exactly.
him as this
It has nothing to do with.
ideal
He's like, this has
peacemaker,
nothing to do with me. Are you guys tripping? Like, I'm like
right?
20. Like, hello. And
The only
so
reason he accepted it is because the goddess
but
told him
he
to.
goes off to be like, okay, I have to become a guy who can
Yeah,
even remotely approach this conversation, right?
right, right,
And I have
right.
no choice.
Yeah,
I have no choice. I have to grow the
mm,
fuck up right now, or the world will be in disarray. And
yeah,
that's really
pretty
heavy
much.
duty for a young guy.
And we also, if his reign is, again, according to the myths, the dude ruled for 43 years without a single war.
Yeah.
The longest Rome was ever at peace.
And
Right? Like,
everybody knows that that has a lot more to do with Algeria
yeah, of
than
course.
New.
Numa would be the first to admit it, right?
He's always popping off. That's the thing that I find fun about him. Is
Yeah.
that he's spontaneous and he can't contain himself and he's always popping off, and I find that endearing.
But one of the cooler things, so after, so on one hand, we got Numa, who's austere, has nothing, living this monastic lifestyle, right? Well, he like you said, he's honest to a fault, so he's telling everyone, I'm married to my muse and she's the goddess and she comes and speaks to me, and everyone's looking at him like,
Yeah.
you're baddie, what are
And
you
she's
doing?
even more like him, so she turns into this snuffleupagus character
Well, what
where
ends up
they're not even
happening,
really sure she has a physical body.
well, they never see her, but
No.
what he does is he
That's
invites the, so they come to his house during the day and they
but
see him.
you see her if she wants you to see her, it's the real deal.
Oh yeah, for sure, but
Like
like,
a wild deer. Like
well,
if
she
you
does
lived with a
show.
wild deer, that deer would be gone when your friends came over, right?
Absolutely. But she does show one thing. So what ends up happening is he invites all of the high, like, noble people of Rome from all of the different tribes, from all of the different cultures, to come together to sit with him at his table, and everyone's expecting it to be shit. Because they're like, the dude eats nothing but
Yeah,
grain.
this is
It's got
some crazy
nothing,
guy. Yeah,
right? And then
yeah,
they come into his house and it's furnished to the
yeah,
nine in embroidery and fancy everything. And
yeah,
it's the best food they've ever eaten.
yeah.
And they're given all this wild drugs and they're given all this wild music. And they
For
don't
example, for
understand how it
example,
could come
Snappy,
from
do I
him.
know this? I do not know this. This is the
Yeah.
first time I'm hearing this. And in
Right.
the book one, he gets taught all that stuff. Weaving,
Okay.
embroidery,
Okay.
cooking, the whole 9 yards. He gets taught how to do that stuff manually as part of his training.
Oh, wow. That's
And this is the
amazing.
first time I'm hearing this that you're telling me that this is what happened with Slater. Fucking
Right. And
A.
it just hit me too, because this is one of the core Hellenistic virtues, is hospitality. And how does Numa prove to the Roman people that he speaks to the goddess? By being the most hospitable. He gives
Because
them the
he's
feast
trained
of a
by
lifetime.
Vestal virgins. And
He
yeah,
gives them the feast of a lifetime,
yeah, yeah.
the guy who
Because
ate nothing but
he's an
crackers.
initiate of Vesta. Yeah.
So I always just loved that story. I just thought it was cute. Numa's a
That's
character,
adorable. Yeah.
right?
And
you know.
that's totally the character that I could mean with. Of course, that would be what he would do.
But
Definitely.
this spirit Agiria is
But
so
also, there
interesting.
could be the time where they show up and they get two sprouts and an onion
Hmm.
because he's a Zen master like that.
Right, right. And
Depending on the situation, that could be exactly what's called for. But in
well,
this case, yeah,
you bring up the sprouts in the onion, which is another magical formula. One of the best parts, right, in Plutarch's Life of Numa
yeah.
is when right
I
there.
did read that when you sent it to me. I read.
Right, I did send you this passage because this part is wild, where Zeus comes to Numa and demands a human sacrifice. Otherwise, the crops aren't going to come, and terrifies the hell out of Numa. And so he goes to Agiria, and
So
Agiria
okay,
says,
Zeus comes to Numa. Is this like normal? Like Zeus comes to other emperors, or is this
"No,
special because Numa talks to the
this is
lightning?
Numa. This is
Numa
Numa.
talks to the
This
lightning.
is
Yeah. See,
this
very
is Numa."
interestingly, the Sabines have more words for lightning, and they have all these different 9 different deities for lightning. It's like the
Right.
Irish has all these words for moss, and in Hawaii they have all these words for lava. And so he's a Samian, so of course it would be
So
more facilitated
it's a
speaking to the.
complicated
But
situation because
anyway,
they're in this famine. They know it's Zeus.
uh,
Okay, the people want to do a human sacrifice. Numa
right,
does not want to do a human sacrifice. Zeus is demanding a human sacrifice.
okay.
So Numa goes out to the grove of Egeria. He speaks to his wife, and what does she tell him? Don't give him children. Give him the fresh shoots of young onions. Of young onion, wild garlic. You know, that's what you, and he will take it, instead of
Okay.
children.
Yeah,
If you ritualize it and you pomp him up and you tell him how much
yeah.
you love him and you burn the onions, he'll accept it
Well, you
as an
can
equal
find
sacrifice.
that in archaeology. You can
Yeah,
find the evidence of using a doll for
yeah,
magic way before you can find any evidence of any human sacrifice rites. Way
right.
before.
Well,
People
it's
would use
always
it.
sympathetic
They would use
magic.
a poppet. They would use a loaf of bread shaped like a person, or a loaf of bread shaped like an organ that they want healing
Well,
for. Or,
we have to remember, so
sympathetic magic.
it's you and I, we're into the woo, we're deep into the woo. But for 99% of people, they cannot comprehend an animist mindset.
Mm,
To an animist, right? If you were to take the onion and embody it with the spirits of the people and sacrifice it to Zeus, yeah, it is a human sacrifice,
or a
right? It is,
mandrake root,
right? It's
or
equivalent,
a ginseng root,
right?
or yeah.
Because these things can be equivalent in that kind of a magical worldview, right?
Yeah.
And all of this makes
It's
sense
only
in a magical
after
world.
slavery really becomes a thing that people are sacrificing slaves the way they once sacrificed livestock or onions. Because if you're a farmer, those are your children, your little
Right,
onions. And
right.
you're waiting a long time for them to sprout up, and it's a big deal to give them up.
When we do see human sacrifice in the art and in the archaeological record, it's usually in times of extraordinary
Something's
suffering,
wrong. Yeah, something's
right?
wrong.
Like something is seriously wrong.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the only common kind of sacrifice that we see is of deformed.
But you
It's
get
people
these
don't want to talk
monarchs
about it, but
amassing, like
people
hoarding
don't want to
wealth,
talk
and
about it. But a lot of children die
they have
young.
100,000
You
slaves.
know,
They're sacrificing some of them.
yeah, they are. They
By
are.
that time, it's
Yeah.
this imbalance that creates the cheapness
you
of
know
life.
there was also a whole big thing with the slaves. They mostly were sacrificing slave children, right?
Yeah.
What happens when you're in a culture that doesn't understand contraception and you have all these slave women around?
No,
What do you
dude,
do?
they did understand comprehend. That's a myth. They
Well,
knew more
yeah,
about contraception than we do right now. We just
mm,
have better machines,
right,
for real.
right. But you're limited in what you can do with the technology that's at your
During this time
disposal.
when we're moving from being matriarchal to patriarchal, and we're getting more dickish and
Right.
having more slaves and more monarchies
You're also
that we're still
losing
trying to
you're losing
recover
technology,
from,
right?
during that time We were using so much birth control that we extinctified a couple of plants that we used for birth control and didn't come up with another pill for another 1,000 years because we used them all up. That's how much birth control we were using during that time.
Yeah, there's many plants that are like that,
Yeah.
there's a whole field of
The
study,
silphiums.
we have cryptozoology, there is cryptobiology, looking at all of these mythical plants and what they could have potentially have been, or have
Yeah.
any of their sister
Yes.
species survived in other forms, or
Yeah.
in other
Like we
places.
right now we're using poplar buds
Mm.
for balm of Gilead, which is something that we extinctified, because it works for rheumatism. But
But
poplar
talking
buds
about
is pretty close.
right, but still talking about this kind of Agiria stuff, I wanted to show
Mm.
you. So
Oh yeah.
when I was digging into Agiria, right? We connect her to Rhea Silvia and
Yeah.
that story, right? We go all the way back to ancient Greece, and
Yeah.
we go back to the story of Nicostrate, or uh, there's various names for her. Sometimes she's called, in the Roman, they call her Carmentis, or
Ah,
Carmen, or
see. And
Carmena,
then and she again, like Rhea Sylvia, is more than
the
one person.
song. Yeah, she's a muse, right?
Yeah.
Well, Agiria and her are kind of, it's weird. They have this weird relationship where sometimes they're completely distinct and sometimes they're not. So a lot of people connect, and here's the thing, they all connect to who? Diana Nemorensis,
Yeah.
who's also called Trivia, Hecate Trivia of the three faces, and she has three distinct faces,
That's
right?
the thing. Is the Rhea
One is
Sylvia has
Carmentis,
two.
one
One
is
is a
Agiria.
wolf and one is a
Yeah,
hooker, and the other one was
is the goddess, was the nymph. Yeah,
escaped. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So you got the three aspects of this character, and she appears in three different forms across the history of Rome.
Ah.
So Agiria with Numa, but when we go back earlier to the founding of Rome, it's
Mm.
Carmentis and
Yeah.
Evander.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets wild, is that the earliest story for Rome's founding, and it still has the wolf mother, it's not about Romulus and Remus. It's
Uh-huh.
about the birth of the Lares.
Right.
And,
Right. Right.
okay,
Right.
right? About the birth of the spirits. And it's about
Elements of this came out in the
Lala, the
story
nymph
that I
Lala.
didn't know about, and later I found out from the book. Yeah,
Because the secret
about
name,
Yeah.
yeah, because the secret name of Agiria is Lala. That's her name when she's a nymph, right? And what ends up happening, you know her, her story, that how it happens in Ovid. It's wild.
No, I'm like,
Okay.
see, when I do a reading for someone, I don't want to know anything before that, right?
Mhm.
So they've told me to stop and get for more information. So now I'm gonna go read all the stuff that you're gonna tell me to read.
I'll
But
give you a
up
whole bunch of
until now,
sources.
I really haven't. I read that one page you sent me about Numa, and that was it. And then as a medium, it's actually easier if I go in blind.
Okay.
But what I'm up against right now is this. Our calendar is fucked up. Sorry. Our calendar is a non-thing. Like our calendar is
Yeah.
wrong. Okay. You can't just be like 7, 8, 9, 10 when it's not the seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th month at all. We're hypnotized and we can't stop doing it. We're lying and we're lying to ourselves. Numa did this whole calendar and nobody, including me, knows what it looks like.
All we know is that he added the month of January and he built the Temple of Janus.
We know about
Right?
January and February,
Yeah.
but we don't know about July, August, September, October, November, December because those are not from him.
Mhm.
July and August is named after two emperors after him. And 7, 8, 9, 10 is Romulus. That's the old calendar from Romulus. That
Mhm.
Numa thought it was so important to replace that it was
Mhm.
just like, this is my one contribution, right? He did a bunch of other stuff, but mainly he was totally focused on his calendar, right? We have to get rid of that old calendar. That was just, he was obsessed, right? Have we gotten rid of the
Mhm.
old calendar? No, we have not. We have integrated exactly two of his suggestions. Hello. And like, what? And so Western magic, let's just say the Western world has some ethics issues, right?
Oh, yeah, you putting it mildly, yeah.
And let's say that Numa didn't.
Yeah, no, Numa
He
didn't.
didn't have ethical issues. He was a
None.
man of peace. Inside his peace, he's having a good time. And he's making sure as many people that he can possibly affect are having a good time also. This is totally him, right? He's a priest of Apollo, as Amos said. He had to have been a priest of
Yeah.
Apollo. There's no way he wasn't. And he was a scribe, and that's part of the getting up to being a priest of Apollo. You have to go through scribe initiation. And what were we talking about? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all good. I wanted to tell you, so when I was digging deep into Agiria, right,
Uh,
I found the
oh,
primal
the
myth.
count. That's what I just wanted to
Mhm.
emphasize and finish what I
Yeah,
was saying there. That we, as witches, as Western magical practitioners, throw away the calendar. We need a new one. Make it up. Make up your own. All
right,
make up our own and then compare notes, and we can make up a common one. But we gotta get off Romulus's timeline because we
right.
know where that
Violent person
process
and
leads. We know where it
yeah,
goes. It's death, doom, and destruction, right?
right,
And we
right.
want to be on the Numa timeline,
We wanna
or
be on the
as
Numa
close
time.
to it, or hey, even more modern one that we make up now.
There you go. I like this idea. But yeah, so when I was digging into this, this primal story, right? And I found the story of Carmentis and I found all of the anyway.
Yes.
Ovid's Fosti
Uh,
goes to the shows you the original earliest image, and then I'm gonna confirm it with the archaeology. So and they talk about Agiria's secret name, Tacita, which means the
yeah.
silent one. And they tell you why she becomes the silent one because her first name was Lala, the chatterbox. She's the babbling brook, and she tells everyone off. And the story is that Zeus comes around and starts attacking all of the nymphs and tries to attack her sister nymph. And
Right.
she stands up and he warns her, if you do anything, then I'm going to punish you. Well, Tacita or Lara decides she's going to say something. She goes to Hera and tells Hera, and then Hera protects her sister. But then Zeus takes his rage out on her, on
Yeah.
Lara, rips
Yeah.
her tongue out,
Yeah.
rips her tongue out, and then get this, they say he casts her to earth, to the swamps of
Mm,
earth,
mm.
to the place called La Terre, where you are hidden. And this is literally paralleling the story of Lucifer, right? This is the fall
I
of
see.
Lucifer, right? For the same thing, speaking up to Jove, speaking up
And
to
we're
God, telling him to
also
fuck off,
describing
telling
a
him his
process.
power is not good, you know?
We're describing a process of one cosmology being
Right?
overcome by another.
Yeah.
So these are
Yeah.
the old gods that now sink into the swamps. But what's funny is we are literally digging them out of the swamps. We're digging them out
Exactly.
of the mud puddles near hot springs.
But this is where
And
it
see,
gets
this
even
is what we're
wilder.
talking about with Egeria.
Mhm.
This is a spring.
Right? It's
There's
a
never
spring.
ever a town anywhere that did not come up around a water source.
Right.
And
Right.
so, no matter what civilization you're talking about, we're still talking about her because that's the spring that everybody is drinking from. That's the water that we get. And so,
Yeah.
when I went to visit in October, I went to visit Nemi. I went to visit the temple of Diana Nemorensis, which is behind barbed wire.
That's
I
so
talked to the
depressing.
local people there, and I asked them, "Where is Albalonga?" And they shook their head. And they said, "You're not going to find it." I said, "Why am I not going to find it?" And they said, "Because they see these monasteries. There's three that you can see from here, right? Go over the hill, there's another five. One of them is built on top of it. And the
Oh my
church won't let
gosh.
anyone anywhere near it. There's absolutely no excavation is ever going to happen."
That's
And
so
he said, in that temple there, the reason it's behind barbed wire is because every time an archaeologist wants to do some research there and excavate some more and find out more about it, the church puts a bastón en medio del ruote. They put a stick in the wheel and they don't allow it. And this only gives more power to the myth, though, because
Right.
people know now, people know for a fact that there are facts that they don't want us to find out that will completely undermine their authority.
Oh yeah.
Because
You
these
know,
stories, the legends are probably more accurate than what passes for written history about this kind of thing.
absolutely. And this is, well, what they don't want you to know is that Diana Nemerensis is a chthonic deity, and she is like
Yes.
she is capable of great violence. In the stories, her priest was always a freed slave, and it was always the best warrior of the freed
Mm,
slaves who was the high priest. And any
mm.
free slave could come and challenge the current priest of Diana Nemerensis and kill him and take his
Oof,
place. Like,
oof.
that's some wild ancient
When's
stuff.
this from?
This is from prior to Rome. This is
So
from the
this is a
prehistory.
previous era when we're talking about they had different names because they were Etruscan names at that point.
Right. This is the roots of that Diana Nemerensis, the Hecate trivia
So
cult
you're talking about
root.
Vagoya.
Or yeah, like, yeah, going right, like the roots of Rome. This is what we're talking about here.
Vagoya. And so there was a certain point the Etruscan priestess of Vagoya moved from Clusium, from Cusi, to the grove in yeah.
Well, okay, so what's wild about this is that, okay,
But they dug it
if
up
we
because
if we
enough
follow the
psychics said so.
Roman,
They dug it up in Clusium, and there's a whole underground epogem with snake murals all
yeah,
over the
so the
place
big
and pools and
sacred place is Aricia. This is really, really special. It keeps
Aricia
That's
is
where,
special. Yeah, that's right.
right,
That's right.
that's where the grove of Diana is,
Yes.
and this is where Lala falls from
See,
grace. That's
see,
where she's hidden.
see.
And what ends up happening with Lala, she becomes Tacita, but she marries Hermes, and they together give birth to the Lares, and it is the Lares who found, Rome. It is the Lares who
And then
are
the
the
story splits
foundation.
off, and then Hermes is doing him by himself. In the north, it's Loki, the
Right.
non-binary god that gives birth to the serpent.
Right, right. But I wanted to show you, so to back this up, so that's the myths, right? That comes from Plutarch talking about Numa, and then Ovid's Fasti talking about Lala, Tacita, Egeria. So now we're going to look at, let me bring up my page here. Here we go. Oh, what's it going? I got to remove that. Okay. Here we go. So I got this really cool book called Remus, a Roman Myth, and it's by the scholar T.P. Wiseman.
Mm,
Really awesome book. You can find it on Amazon.
mm.
Um, so this is showing the earliest evidence, archaeological evidence we have for the wolf goddess, right?
Ah,
The wolf mother
okay.
in ancient Rome. So this is
Mm,
an Etruscan mirror. So we'll read what they have to say here. It says, our earliest evidence for the she-wolf and twins is a document with a bizarre history. An engraved bronze mirror, supposedly found at Bolsena in Etruria, was sold in Florence in 1877 to the collector Alessandro Castellani. It was discussed at the Instituto de Correspondenza Archeologica the following year, but doubts soon emerged about its authenticity, and the purchaser
mm,
chose not to keep it. Evidently believing it was only of interest to metallurgists, he presented it to the Kingdom of Italy's new industrial museum, where it remained until 1939. In that year, the Museum Artistico Industrial was closed and the mirror was presented to the Antiquario Comunale. It was widely assumed to be a fake. The principal editor of the Etruscan Spiegel, the authoritative collection of Etruscan mirrors, had said so in 1897. 8 years later, his work on the iconography of the Roman she-wolf, Cécile Dullaire, but wrongly. In a long, detailed discussion in 1982, Richard Adam and Dominique Berquel demonstrated that there is no reason to doubt its authenticity. They were able to show that it was of Praenstein workmanship, approximately datable to the third quarter of the 4th century BCE. 100 years late, the mirror now presents itself as a crucial document for the interpretation of the Roman foundation legend. The
right.
scene it shows is a strange one. The suckling she-wolf is on one side of a rocky hill, above an owl and another bird, perhaps a raven. perch on a dead tree. Below lies a large lion, looking out genially at the spectator. There are four human figures apart from the twins. Above, lying nonchalantly on the rocks, is a young man naked, but for a cloak and hat. His left hand is raised in a gesture of refusal or farewell towards a young woman, veiled and carrying a fan like object. She has a sad expression and looks intently at the young man, but he turns his head away towards a wild man, bearded and disheveled, who stands to the left of the suckling scene. As one of the two witnesses of it, he is naked except for boots and a goatskin cloak, loosely knotted around his neck by the forelegs. He carries a shepherd's throwing stick. Opposite him, another standing figure witnesses the suckling scene and points at it with his right hand. He is bearded, wearing a belted tunic and carrying a spear. So this is here's the actual mirror itself. It's really hard to make out that scene. But the scholar offers a really interesting interpretation for it. I want to read his interpretation for it.
And this would
Um,
be 300 years after the projected founding of Rome.
yes, correct. So this is what he has to say about trying to understand what this represents. He says, "My own second attempt at an explanation makes no assumptions about the wolf and twins and tries to account for the four mysterious figures in their own terms. I think that the two standing figures are Pan Lycaeus, identified by the goat skin and throwing stick, and Quirinus. So Pan Lycaeus, right? This is the god of the wilderness, Pan, right? And Quirinus is the god of the Roman people, the deified Romulus, but he's also a much older god and is not always identified with Romulus. Um, their respective festivals at Rome were the Lupercalia and the Quirinalia, right? 15th and the 17th of February during the 9 days of the Parentatio for the dead, 13th to the 21st of February. The only other named festival during that period was the Feralia, February 21st, in honor of Tacita or Muta, the silent goddess,
Yeah.
right? Whose story is told in Ovid's Fausti. But Ovid also says that she's Egeria, says that they're the literal same, you know? She was a nymph called Lara or Lala the Chatterbox, who warned her sister Juturna to flee the approaches of amorous Jupiter. Furious, Jupiter tore out her tongue and banished her to the underworld with Mercury as her escort. On their way, they entered a wood where the guiding god is said to have taken a fancy to her. As he forced her, she vainly tried to speak through her dumb mouth and begged with her expression instead of words. She conceived and bore twins. They guard the crossroads and always keep watch in our city. They are the Lares. The Lares Praesitites were the guardians of Rome. It seems to me likely that the story of their parentage explains the central panel of the design on the mirror, right? So the earliest version we have of this myth of the she-wolf has nothing to do with Romulus and Remus and has everything to do with Hecate and the creation of the
The three
Lares.
faces of the goddess. That's
The
what
three faces, exactly. Diana, Hecate, the three faces of the goddess, and the creation of the Lares with Hermes. And it's just wild to me. It's just so wild to me. It's all there. Like, and you can see how, they're taking that central story and they're just slightly twisting it and they're changing things around,
Well, and it's presumed that the Larrys at the corners is the oldest
Yeah.
manifestation. Now we have the Madonna and a little flickering electric candle at every corner,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And
It's
then
so wild.
some depictions of the Madonna, she's holding an egg, not a
Right,
baby.
right.
And so the wolf and the snake, these motifs, these paths or these clans are specific to that area. And Latinos is a canus, is a dog path. And
Wow.
the Etruscans were serpent centered, including dog, but serpent centered opposite. And so I'm not really sure what that's about, but the deeper you dig in the ground, the more snakes and dogs you find.
Yep.
and the less of this other stuff. You know, before there's ever a god that looks like a person, there are these guys.
And it's
And then
yeah.
you go further east, and east it's mainly the bull horns, you know. I mean, depending on, you know, what your
What's so
local
wild to
fauna is
me is
doing.
also how much this myth has been occulted, how much this character of Agiria Rhea Silvia is everywhere and nowhere. They take her and they split
Yes.
her into dozens of characters, right? Like when you look at the Roman festivals, like we're talking about right now, we're in the middle of the Saturnalia. Okay, on the 21st, we're going to have a celebration to her, okay, as Angerona, which is another secret name for the same goddess. Okay, the Angeronia is the Diwali is happening on the 20th. Then on the 23rd, we have another festival, her with a different secret name, Aka Laurentia, the mother of Larry's, right?
Yes.
Then when we hop into February, we get the ones that we just talked about with her as Diamuta, the silent god. It's like lady has like 5 different festivals in the Roman tradition.
Oh,
You know?
or 100. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
There,
Or many,
there,
many, many. There's
because
also
it,
Bonadia,
because
the good
there's more than
goddess.
one girl.
Yeah. 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 Because it's
That's
cyclical.
the thing. Is that only in alchemical sense do we have this one, two, three, four reductive situation where there's only one goddess? There's never only one goddess.
No.
When did that happen? Dig
Right.
down and find me a layer where there's only one goddess. No, there's tons of them because there's different kinds of waterways and there are different kinds of plants and there are different stars and the femininity is infused through everything, you know.
And again,
And
we're dealing with this animist mindset that's very hard for people to understand. So like when we look at the Roman tradition, we're talking about the goddess Ops today for
right,
Apalia, Rhea, right? Well, she is distinct from Hera, but also the same energy as Hera because she is Hera's mother and Hera replaces her. But also she still exists as an ancestor, you
yeah.
know, and you can go even further back to Gaia. And you could say that ultimately Gaia, Rhea, Hera are all the same
Well,
but
here's
different,
what's
distinct
implicit
in one,
in the animist worldview,
right?
right? Is that there are rays or
Yeah.
flavors, or you know, someone can be born and like maybe you have a more mm, ocean goddessy kind of personality,
Mhm.
and maybe your physiognomy and your personality kind of make you seem like more of a ocean goddessy a type of person. While your brother is like everybody agrees he's more of like a cloud god type physiognomy. He's tall and skinny and he's got bright blue eyes, and you know, and so there are these types of people for one thing, and they do correspond to different elements. Some of us are more bilious and some of us are more phlegmatic, and so without ever doing any initiation, a human being can be interpreted as the voice of a river or an ocean or a forest just because they kind of look like that and sound like that. Then you get into initiations where someone is, oh, I want to dedicate my life to the river. Well, then
Right.
that person, like a beekeeper who looks more and more and more like a bee, the longer they're a beekeeper, they look like a freaking bee. Say they don't, they do. And they can't get cancer and all this stuff. And they become more like a bee, right? The more time they
Right.
spend, you know. And they got the Scythians that spend all day with the horse, they're drinking the horse blood and and the milk and all this stuff. And they get more like horsey, like they're these horsey women, right?
Well,
And
they talk
so
about this too with the Amazonians
what kind of
explicitly,
element are you channeling, whether you're trying or
right?
not? And then what do you dedicate yourself to? What do you go into bhakti states over? You know,
We also got to remember too, like
and then these
when
are titles, right? Like
right,
Christ and
right,
Magdalene, these are titles. And there's a whole story where the Magdalene doesn't go to France, she goes to northern Italy. But these are clearly two different people carrying
right,
the same title. But we would have to give
right,
up the church's lie that this is one person. Because it
right.
isn't.
You're so right.
It
You're so
never
right.
was. And it never was. So there's always a ton of Hecates and a ton of Rhea
Oh yeah,
Silvias. because there are types of people. There's a never stop being born, like Artemis type folks. They just never stop being born, no matter how you
No,
treat them. And
they
and then
talk about
some of
this.
them get real serious, and then they're like, "Oh, you have to call me Diana now, and I'm gonna live in the woods." And other ones are just content being a little bit that way.
Well, we also got to remember too, like so much about the tradition is about one of the ultimate ends of this magical tradition is to achieve a deification, right? It's to go through, one of the crazier stories when I'm looking
You
at all the
want
myths,
some kind of union with the god of some kind,
right?
you know?
Right, a union mostly.
Yeah,
So, but one of the wilder things when I'm looking at these Egeria myths, and one
yeah.
of them, Heracles shows up at the grove at Erysia and goes and visits Egeria with Evander, who is this, mythical Pelasgian founder of Rome in one of the versions. And Heracles gets an oracle from Egeria, and what does Egeria tells him? You will be divine, and tells him to set up a shrine to himself and to pray to himself to complete his own labors.
Wait, what?
She tells him that you are divine and to make a shrine to yourself
He's
so
got to
you can
step into his
complete your own.
genius. He's got to step into his genius because
Yes,
he's
he's
being
got to
his own
step into.
spectator. I totally get that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You're divine. You're on the
yeah,
path of divine ascension, and if you want
yeah.
to complete your labors, you got
Yeah.
to do it yourself. You got to
Now,
worship
somebody else
yourself.
that would make them narcissistic in a not good way.
But
But
Heracles
this
is on
guy
that
was
path.
lacking in the narcissism at that moment. Yeah,
He
it
was on
takes
that
it
path,
takes a little audacity to express yourself in any fashion.
and
But
it's just
especially
wild to
with
me,
strokes.
that
Yeah.
because that's how the path for Heracles does end. It doesn't. It's not a grand deification like you would think. He's dying. He can't die, but he's poisoned and paralyzed permanently. So
Oh,
what ends up happening is
oh God.
there's this centaur who he's like who is prophesized to kill him, and so Heracles kills him, but then his one of his partners, he doesn't ever treat women well, Heracles, and one of the I can't remember her name unfortunately off the top of my head, but one of his partners collects the blood after he kills the centaur who's prophesied to kill him. And then when
And then
Heracles,
how does this play in where Eamon says that centaur is code for child trafficker in some way?
well, because in all of the early, this happens to Heracles, and this happens to many different characters. But what they do is they send the young boys off to the wilderness to be raised by the centaurs, to learn the art of war, and to be
Oh,
taught in
right.
a pederastic. And it's explicit. They say you're going to be in a pederastic relationship with a
Jesus
centaur.
Christ.
So
So this
right,
is one of the twisted ways that they worked in the sex and the drugs to their initiation.
absolutely. But the same thing was it's happening in multiple different this kind of pederasty thing is so common, and it's in there it's a real way to transform and to force a person into a path of life, and it's
It's because
real deep creepy
I
magic.
think this is my impression is that it gets more and more like that the more patriarchal we get.
Yeah,
Right. Is that in the matriarchal tradition that was not happening, and then it's happening more and more as we switch over to patriarchal paradigm. There's something inherently violent towards women and children about it,
right,
and it more and more expresses itself that way.
right, right.
But this is why it's so delicate when we're recovering a tradition that has been lost or buried. That
Yeah.
we don't dig up a later version where it's already been corrupted and then reenact that, right?
Well, we've talked about this so much with the maenads. Like,
So
it's
part of our
very clear
problem,
those
and
are
this is what
birthrights,
Numa is
you know?
grappling with.
Yeah.
How do you bridge this into now, right?
Right? He's
But
connecting
in
to
the
Diana
matriarchal
Nemorensis. It's
lineage,
like
you
horrible.
do have sex and drugs in your initiation. It's just not toxic and it's not hurting you. And
Right.
it's not hurting your initiates. And there's no confusion about that. Not ever. Right. And then the more patriarchal we get, the more harmful the initiations would appear to have become up until now, when we can safely say that that child sex abuse is so rampant in the child Catholic Church that most people have thrown out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, it's like I look at the process and the reasoning for this magic. What are they trying to do? What are the centaurs about? They're about creating beasts of men. They're about turning men into beasts, turning men into violent murderers. That's what the whole process was, you know?
But so you were saying about Heracles and this one centaur. The
So
centaur
so
was
the
basically a hitman centaur?
so the story is that Nereus is supposed to kill Heracles, but Heracles beats him.
And is
But
he
when
he's paid a hit, or is this some service to some
I
organization?
can't remember I'd have to go look back up the exact story of the
Far out,
centaur, but
man.
I don't
Okay.
remember the full story offhand. But with Heracles' death, what ends up happening is his girlfriend collects a bunch of the blood from Nereus because she wants Heracles to marry her, doesn't want Heracles to be flipping around with Heracles has sex with anything that moves, right? And she wants him to commit.
Yeah,
And
Carla calls him a sick fuck. Yeah.
he won't. So she winds up poisoning him with this blood, but it doesn't kill him. It puts him in a near death coma where because
Oh,
he's kind of
you're not going
semi-divine, he
anywhere
can't die.
now. How do
So
you
what
like
they
him
finally
now?
so what do they do in the end is they strap him to the pyre and they set him ablaze.
Well, they
But
burn him alive because he's quadriplegic. Awesome.
but
See, this is the
he
thing.
he transcends but this is a magical image because this parallels the same thing we see with
Bueno, see, if you could look
and
at it
with
in alchemical terms, you go for the dismemberment and then the dissolution.
well with the goddess Estrella and with the Medea one. Okay, there's two different things that kind of happen with that Medea character in her
Mm,
story.
mm.
And one of them, she sets herself ablaze willingly, kills herself, destroys her body to ascend to the stars and become a god, to leave this world behind. She
That's
abandons
Estrella,
them.
right?
What?
That's Estrella.
Estrella, right? Estrella. And in another version that is parallel but different, she abandons the world, doesn't kill herself, but transforms into an echidna and goes into the depths of the earth. What I see in both of these is
Another way to
that
cope.
above,
Yeah.
it's the same story. That which is above is the same as that which is below. The both paths do the same
Well, yeah,
thing
and
because
these are initiation. These are initiatory deaths. This is
initiatory
different. We're
death.
not talking about
No,
actual killing. We're
no.
talking about this. What happens in initiation is that the small self is done correctly. The small self dies, and it
Right.
does to a tangible degree. People call your name, and you hear it echoing somewhere else. After my
Oh, it's nested.
initiation, my friend Pat drove past me at the airport 15 times. She didn't see me. She came to pick me up. I'm standing there and waving. She didn't see me. There is a
Right.
tangible shift in the small self that happens in initiation. Otherwise, it's not initiation. So it's a
So
death.
I want to add a correction. I messed up the centaur's name. It's Nessus is the name of the centaur. So I apologize. I'm not as super, Heracles has been a more recent thing that I've been able to engage with because, I it's taken me some time to actually unpack some of it, but growing up, I was such a radical leftist
I
kind
don't
of
know
like,
anything about it. So he's dying 2 or 3 times, right? So first he's paralyzed and then he's
well, he gets
incinerated.
poisoned. He gets poisoned by this blood, and then they put him on a pyre and they set him ablaze. But
Yeah.
that allows him to achieve deification. That's
So then he
they say
does
he
a
becomes
Estrella
Zeus.
thing. Okay.
He does the Estrella thing, and that's why I mentioned Estrella and Medea because her story parallels. Right, she sets
And
herself ablaze.
Medea invented napalm or something.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. Right, Medea invents napalm, and one of the stories she sets herself ablaze and rises to the stars. And in another version, she goes to the earth and disappears. And in both of these versions, they say she'll come back. Right, like Virgil talks about Estrella, she'll return as Saturnia. And she'll reinvigorate, bring back the golden age. The cycle will change.
And this is where we return to the vegetative myths, which are
Mhm.
different from your transcendent myths and from your
Right.
well tree myths. The vegetative gods are the ones like the core that go literally in your terms from grounding, from gardening, that are called the Persephone phase, and then to me it's like really super confused when you take the vegetative deities and then you try to make some sort of justification for a codependent, tolerating abuse, kind of stand by your man kind of bullshit, right? Because that
Right.
isn't what we're talking about. You guys are talking about
No.
plants. This is your
Right.
food, people. This is not a justification for tolerating abuse or telling people that this should necessarily be part of it, or you got to tame that evilness in your man. No, bitch. He tames his own evilness, or he does not get to come over.
But
That's
it's
just the
still,
way it works.
the feminine tradition, all human traditions are wild, but there is an authentic myth there with that. This is just a reality of some women in a patriarchal world, and I hope we can eventually break free of all this. But this is a reality. Women who were abducted. How do you achieve power in an abduction scenario? You have two options that we see in the
The top
myths,
from the bottom is your
right?
only option.
You
It was a
make them,
beautiful
you
film.
transform the monster into your
It
husband.
was called The
You have
Restaurant
kids
or
and
something,
you
and
overthrow him.
you had this sadistic chef who had imprisoned everyone on the island, and he started to get violent. This turned into a slasher film, and the only person who can take control of the situation is the hooker.
Right.
She's being paid to be there, and but all of a sudden she just like yawns and starts telling him what to do, and he starts doing it. And this just it just has to do with power,
Mm.
and it has to do with how much sex has to do with power. And so yeah, you're going to
Well,
use what you
this is
got to get
something.
out of a bad situation, but that's not what the vegetative myth is about.
No,
It's
but
about
what
your
we
food, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. But this connects us to another wilder myth, or a wild myth when I look at the story of Medea, right? The essential, and I look at the story of Helen. Who is the culprit? Who is the most problematic person in these myths? Or I shouldn't say person, but what is the force that causes everything to unfold in both instances? Aphrodite.
Yeah.
Aphrodite.
Yeah.
Aphrodite is behind both of these because
And I
she
think
blesses
in
Jason
most
and
magical
gives him the
traditions, we
curse
are
magic,
cautioned not to do love magic because it
right?
so
It's the
often
most evil
backfires.
thing imaginable. Look what happens. Jason binds Medea to him, and look what the flip happens, right? And then if you look at
Do not trust.
Paris, right? Paris tries to bind Helen using Aphrodite magic, and it works. And look what the F
Mm,
happens. In both of these
mm.
cases, the love magic works, right? It's not that Aphrodite's power doesn't work, it's that it
And
works and it's a
and
nightmare.
both stories have kind of like a backstory of plant medicine. So there
Yeah,
are also cautionary fables about what plants not to take, not to combine.
yeah,
And so, yeah, there's something about combining the Aphrodite magic with the not flow that is counterproductive. If you're gonna
yeah.
do magic with Aphrodite, you're gonna be doing it to promote flow,
And then where it
not to
gets,
bind, because there's no way that it could do that. Aphrodite is flow; it's not binding.
and you know what is so wild? I went in and I'm trying to find, okay, so what is the magic that Jason used to curse Medea?
And
And
what
what do
is
I
it?
find? The most disgusting thing I've ever seen in a black magic spell.
Oh
It's
no!
it's called the binding of the wryneck. And what they would so the wryneck is a sacred nymph. This is a special bird, but it's not a bird. It's one of the bird song. It's one of the most
Mm,
empowered spirits of the air that will sing you the story, the powerful story of the bird. No wonder Medea teaches Orpheus and them all this magic because they bind the wryneck. And what they do is they take it and they strap it to a wheel, a spinning lapis lazuli, and they spin it into creation. And this parallels the ripping apart of Zagreus, right? The spinning top, the toy that rips him apart, the jinx, the yonks, right? It's this It's this object that you become obsessed with that binds you by greed. The essence of that Aphrodite magic is that it sacrifice, rapes, and destroys a nymph and makes you obsessed and fall into a hell creation. like oh it may even create a whole other separate dimension. I think like it's just what the implications are wild.
And what is that? What's the meaning of that story for you?
uh Love magic is the absolute antithesis. It's the worst. It's the greatest of evil. It's pure greed, and it's pure destruction of another's will, right? We see this reflected too with the muse, you know.
So trying to control love is even more diluted than trying to say you own a piece of land or trying to
Yeah,
control the women and children. It's even
yeah,
more diluted.
it's even
It's
more
because it
diluted.
takes it one step further. Not only
Yeah,
I want to control this person, but I want to control the nebulosity between us.
right? I want to control your very thoughts, your very being. I want to make you an object
This
of my
is
desire. I
this
want to
person needs
reduce
an
you,
SLA meeting,
you
right?
know?
Like
Oh yeah.
nobody's business. This is love addiction. Yeah,
Yep. And
addiction
it's
to the internal chemistry, and that's where the adversary lives.
and it's if you look
I've
at
known so many
creation,
people that can overcome so many obstacles that you're just your jaw. You did that. You did that. You did that. And
right?
the adversary inside is the most difficult one.
Right. But we see this parallel because okay, right? If you know, when I look at okay, so that Aphroditic magic is the worst thing you could do, just about,
Mm.
right? So then what is the opposite of this? It's lifting the veil of the muse, right? And how do you lift the veil of the muse? You're in that virtuous spirit of Numa, and you wait. You wait in loving adoration. You ask, and then if it happens, it happens. If it
Yes.
doesn't, it doesn't.
Yes. You
You
learn how to
wait for
express
love
your
to come
needs,
in.
and then you learn that they won't
Yeah,
always get mad, even if you
right.
express them.
So, like, if you look in my mind, Numa and Jason are absolute poles, you know, the most greedy versus the most pious. You know,
Numa and who
one,
are poles?
Jason,
Okay.
right? Jason, who
Yeah.
binds Medea to him and then
Yeah.
discards her,
Yeah.
versus Numa, who falls
Yeah.
in love with his muse and dedicates his
Yes.
life to her,
Yes.
right? One
So
becomes a
if
king,
you want to
and one
move the
is
muse to cry
the
so hard
fire.
she turns into a waterfall after you die, act
Yeah,
like Numa. If you want her to light you on fire with napalm, act like Jason.
right, right. This is showing you, like, if you know, you can force. This is the thing. Like that kind of black magic exists. You can force your will upon the world. All you're going to do is lead
But
to
it's
generations
not
of
gonna
violence.
get you anything that you actually want.
No, it won't. It
Because the
won't.
place that it takes you is not one of peace and happiness. It's an eternal discontent kind of thing.
Nope. And you won't be able to ever move beyond this realm until you
And I
learn how to
wonder
play nice with
too.
others.
I wonder too how many of these stories would be cautionary fables about all the many ways that initiation can be harmful if you do it wrong.
Right.
You know,
No, that's true. And how initiations can be weaponized. Not all initiations are good.
they could be weaponized, they could be monetized. You know,
Right. It's just like not all spirits are good. I mean, all you have to invite all spirits in, but you can
no, and
sit
not all
and
people are just
invite a
making
demon
money.
in, you
Yeah,
know?
and if their spirits are dead people, as most of our spirits are, then
Right.
there's all kinds of people there, and so you have to
Yeah.
have some
Very
sort
true.
of vibrational, knob. You have to have a soundboard with all these knobs on it that you know how to calibrate, not control, not bind, but calibrate with the sounds that are coming in, and any collection of sounds can be cacophony or music depending on how you mix it, right? And so you
Right.
have to. The spirits never asked me to do something I can't do. But
No.
they never asked me to do something that I'm like, oh, sure, I can do that. They always ask me to do something where, like, are you kidding me right now? Right. And so that's also a way we have to keep ourselves. Like, we don't want to keep ourselves in such an austere state, right? That we're having trouble sleeping and this is interfering with our creative process
Right.
and we're not eating or whatever. But we also don't want to get too comfortable. We get too attached. There's a price to pay in inspiration right away.
Right.
And you know, I got to be ready, because what I know from my dedication to the muses is that they're gonna ask me to do strange shit. They're gonna ask me to drop everything and move. They're gonna ask me to, okay, oh, you don't like the cold? Okay, we're going to Helsinki now. You know, they're doing things to expand my range and to refine this instrument. You know, not for my personal satisfaction, but so that they can make better use of it.
Right. Right. Well, the spirits are always going to send you on a journey. We're on a path of generation that exists within the world and is connected to life and expanding life. So anything that you do is going to bring you into life. It's going to bring you into more connection and into the whole point is diversification, creation, and evolution. So that is what the muse is going to do. She's going to make you creative. She's going to make you learn. And she's going to make you expand beyond your limits. That is
Yes.
the whole point. That's the whole
Yes.
point of life. If you're
And
not
if you don't,
expanding
if
beyond
that's
your
not
limits,
your
what are you
idea
living?
of a good time,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
this is not the path for you.
No.
But to me, it's just actually more fun and more satisfying than anything else I've tried. So
Right? Right? Well, this is so well.
I don't do it because I'm tripping balls on some narrative. I do this because this is vital. You know, this is alive. This is so that my first training being Zen, so that any day is a good day to die. So I haven't spent today not doing my mission or my what I'm born to do. I haven't spent today avoiding the flow. I've spent today in it with life. You know.
Well, there comes a point where it's like in the magical path, it's like, are you going to turn your life into art? Are you going to tell your own profound magical story? Are you going to
You can
view
tell
your life
somebody else's story
as
and jerk
a
off to
myth?
somebody else's sexual fantasy, or are you
Right.
gonna own your apparatus and live
Exactly.
with it? You know.
And eventually I just said, you know what? What if I engaged in the play? What if I lived my life as if it were its own unfolding magical story? And then it became so.
Yeah,
You
man.
know, I did a ritual asking for a teacher in the Saturnian tradition, and then a dude shows up, bald with Medea tattooed on his head, and he's
What? Let's go.
initiating me in a feminine rite on live YouTube.
Yeah.
you know, like I asked for that stuff and it happened.
Yep.
And it was beyond wild, and
You
that's
asked
just
and then you
the
showed up for it,
beginning.
because lots of times
Yeah.
people ask and they're like, "Oh, well, no." And
Well, that's the other thing. You probably well, this is the other. One of the things I wanted to mention is that everyone understands the risk of taking the leap, but few people understand the risk of not leaping. There's
it's
equal
so
risk in doing freaking
it's
nothing. You
very
got one life to
painful.
live.
It's
If you
very
sit and do
painful to
nothing,
not take the
you
leap.
know,
Yes.
you're wasting your
But then it's
precious
also
gifts.
some people struggling and finding the community. Like your
Yeah,
teacher didn't show up until you're ready. I'm sure there were other points in
yeah.
your life
Oh yeah.
previously where you were longing for a teacher and doing rituals to have one and it didn't come.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Or teachers would appear. Well, people appear. The muse, in my experience, it's always teachers come and teachers go. They come
Oh yeah.
for me. They offer something. They give you a form of usually some kind of initiate. And when I think of initiation, it's really a change and expansion of perspective. You don't perceive the world the
Well,
same anymore.
unless you're on a formal path, you know,
Right.
Mafedefun, Obafefe,
Right.
and
Right. Right.
Yakere.
Right.
Those are the people that initiated me, and I have a lifetime relationship with them. Sure, if
Absolutely.
we're gonna be like doing each other wrong and stuff, then that could change. But no, it's not going to. You know, we've
There,
been here a
yeah,
couple
there are
decades. I
many.
can safely say that I'm devoted. But you know, a lot of people they've been married 40 years and they find out something about their partner they didn't know, and they're like, "Oh, get me out of here." So you don't know. It's people. It's human beings
Well,
interacting.
it's
But so
you know
far, so good. And
to
and
make it.
and
I think.
and and I also just signed up for a class in Sicily with Carly Ionescu, and I surrender
Oh, amazing!
myself to her academic and esoteric wisdom. I'm ready for some
I love
form
her.
of Artemis initiation there. I've done, been initiated by the bee shaman people in the UK that they shut down their institute, more sex scandal. And and there was some lying, there was some castaneda bullshit going on, you know. But
Right.
I only wanted to take that class for 20 years, and then my spirits got on me and they're like, do it now, do it now, do it now, do it now. And I'm like, fuck, I don't have any money and fucking, can't can't figure out what babysitter to leave my dad with and all this. Anyway, it happened. I went. It was the last time. It was the last class they did. The whole
For me,
institute shut down after that. So it
oh
was really
wow.
actually the last time to get what
You
they knew.
when I think about all these initiations and stuff, for me, it occurred, for what, okay, I shouldn't, it's not just about a perspective. It has to be an actual act, a ritualized act, and it has to be meaningful for you. It has to result
Yes.
in the physical change,
Dude, the bees came in the house when we were in there.
right?
The bees came in the house and they're landing on people. This is real shit. Yeah.
Ammon brought me to three different types of initiation, basically. One was through the magic of books, taught me
Mm.
how to open the
Yes.
portals, right?
Yes.
We've discussed this and use the
Yes.
power of imagination, right? The other one was I did the ritual to the Syrian goddess, the red goddess, right?
Mm.
Which is Aphrodite Urania,
Mm.
Cybele,
Mm.
and that's where I shaved my head. And now I haven't cut my hair in 2 years. So, but I went through that, and that was a death mourning ritual,
Yes, it is. We do that too. We do this head shaming and stuff.
and it's a grain goddess thing, right? You're going because you cry for the death of Adonis Dionysus, the dying and rising god, right?
The
The
dying
Zagreus,
rising, the vegetative
right?
god. These deaths, these
Yeah,
visits to the underworld are about shedding the egoic self and
right.
becoming the self.
Right, and for most people those kind of initiations, they would think of them as not as important as that public display one, but in my mind the public display one was the least rewarding. Out of all of the ones that I did, it was worth it. I wanted that full experience. I committed to the full experience, but those weren't that experience was, you know me, I'm non-binary, so engaging in the feminine was not any uncomfortable thing to me. I'm watching the guy next to me, Nick, God bless, like, bless his heart, but it was squirming. I'm watching Ammon, and Ammon is squirming. Their masculinity is under threat,
It's
and I'm just
challenging,
like,
yeah.
and I wasn't challenged in the slightest.
Well, here's the thing. There's a backstory to this challenging, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
at around like 30 after your first Saturn return, your
Mm,
body is gonna go through some changes. And some
right,
women experience ejaculation, which they hadn't experienced before. They
right,
experience maybe a wave, or some they experience a continuous loop. But ejaculation is like, oh no, what's happening? I peed. And then, but it becomes clear the fluid is transparent and it does not have the scent of urine, nor does it have the scent of the opaque fluid that is the other kind of ejaculate. So there's this clear fluid that is the ejaculate, and alchemists use it in their preparations. They understand that it's a different
yeah. It's the
fluid than the
equivalent.
white one. So,
It's the
but what
equivalent of
happens
male
when the
semen
women
and a
start
female.
ejaculating is they just want to roll over and go to sleep afterwards.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then sometime in the 30s or more often the 40s, the man will experience another kind of thing. They're having a
Right,
prostate orgasm. And
right,
it's a clear fluid that drips instead of the opaque white fluid that spurts. And this is a more feminine orgasm. They can start to get into the loop. And then they have this other fluid. Yeah. And so afterwards, though, after a guy has a prostate orgasm, they don't roll over and go asleep. They're like, oh no, don't leave me.
oh gosh.
Because guess what? These are neither masculine nor feminine traits.
Right, they're human traits.
Is this just our anatomy is more, automatically defaults to one, but can
Right,
have both.
right. We're all internet connected. We all
And
have
so
those
it's one thing to
those
put on an
aspects in.
outfit and act it out, but this is the actual alchemical transformation that is occurring in the physical body that we
Right,
are commemorating with the ritual, if we're really doing the thing.
right,
Now, if nowadays, good luck initiating someone into their prostate orgasm as part of their initiation. No, you're going to have to give them a book.
Right.
No,
Right.
because we
I
can't
mean,
trust
we
anyone born
we
in this century to do that clean. We
we
can't.
we're I remember, okay, the internet is a wild place and you get to see the worst of humanity and the weirdest of
But
humanity.
but
But
but ostensibly, this is what they're being sent out to the centaur to learn, like in a positive world, right?
well, it's like so few people are in touch with themselves, let alone their body. I remember, you go to some of these men centric subreddits. If you're familiar with the website Reddit, it's a community forum where people post stuff, and you can go to these places where people will share stories, and it is not uncommon. And this is like, it doesn't make any sense to me, but it's not uncommon for men who won't even wipe their own ass, won't touch their own ass because they're afraid they will become gay by touching their own body. And so they live in filth and self-hatred. It's just like, it's the most absurd thing. But this
No,
is a
there
reality.
is totally
This is
that.
how patriarchally
Yeah,
obsessed and
yeah.
violent we are as a culture, that some men get so messed up they can't even touch their own bodies. They can't even
There are
engage.
women also who have been
Right. Women
shamed
who
into
don't ever
never
look at
touching
themselves,
themselves. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's another
No,
thing. You
I've
see,
talked to
you're right.
Catholic women who were raised Catholic that I assumed that everyone's sexual relationship, their first one, was with themselves, and
You
until
would
I
think,
spoke with a number of Catholic women, said no, actually, I didn't masturbate until my first divorce.
which is wild.
What? What? No, because they went to Sunday school and they were told the road to hell and all this stuff.
Right.
They never did it until they're way grown up. Like after
Right.
they already had kids and stuff. Okay,
Oh
but
yeah, well,
that's
you're told that
terrible.
this stuff is evil, and you put everything under
That's
clothes, and you never
terrible.
look at yourself or see yourself.
Now
You
you
know,
take into account that if a good man, his self esteem, is better if he could satisfy his woman, right? But
right?
you think you're going to hell if you let go. You think now he's going to think you're a hooker. We get stuck in all these paradigms, and nobody's happy. And this is that game working as it's intended to work.
So I actually got to take this really interesting course in university on human sexuality. I can't remember the professor's name, but she was wild. She
Mm.
was a sex therapist for years, and she told us stuff and confirmed things that I was just like, wild to me. She used to, for a couple of years, she worked in Utah, and she said not one set of couples, several couples who were having improper sex, side sex, belly button sex, anal sex, and thinking that this was sex, and we're wondering why they weren't having children because they're so ignorant about their bodies. No one ever showed them anything, and they're so afraid of it. They
Yeah.
just do it and get it
It was
over
like
with.
Marie Antoinette. Well, Marie
Yeah,
Antoinette and her husband couldn't figure out why they weren't getting pregnant either.
yeah, but like, and you would think in the modern age, like this is happening still. This is still
No, they're beyond Googling. See, the most people, they just look it up, right? But
right.
no, they think they're going to hell if they look it up.
They think they'll go to hell.
Yeah.
You'll see some of these ultra religious sects. Like you see this in some of these Orthodox Jewish sects where people will literally wear eye obscuring lenses, so when they're walking out in public, they can't see the world around them. Like they're so in the cult, you're not even allowed to perceive the outside world. It's
But if
like
you think about it, in these cults where sex abuse is so rampant, to whose benefit is it that the children
right.
don't know what sex is?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it benefits the elite. It benefits, the system we
Rapists
have.
don't
Yeah.
want kids to know they're being raped. Yeah.
Which what do you think about, okay. I just find it just wild, this moment that we're in, where the Catholic Church is condemning Donald Trump, and you've got like the biggest pedos in human history condemning each other and fighting it out and trying to act, it's just wild to me.
Did you see those pictures in Noam Chomsky?
I Yes. And you know what? Thanks for manufacturing fucking consent, Chomsky.
Fuck that
You
dude. Yeah.
liberal. Like you proved. Like it's just, you know, it's just so bloody sad. I For years and years, Chomsky has done a lot of good work, and we can't dismiss some of the good work that he's done. But ultimately, we have to look at him through this lens now, right? And the reality of who he was, and that is, he was the media's darling leftist. He's a pressure valve. He was allowed to speak. He was a pawn of power. You don't hang out with someone like
If you
Epstein
go
then,
to an
you know?
anarchist meeting and there are no girls there, run like hell.
Right. Right. And it's always these anarchists who are always advocating for this holier than thou position that can never be actualized on earth. Or they advocate for you. Like, the thing that always used to upset me with Chomsky is, like, you're constantly advocating for the two-party binary power system, telling
And he would
everyone to vote
default into it.
Democrat.
Yeah, he would say he wasn't doing that, and then he would do that.
Exactly. Vote for Hillary because Trump is an existential crisis. Don't try to come up with any alternative, but it's like, at a certain point, for the longest time, I'd give him the benefit of the doubt. But now with this stuff, dude, you are what you fought against. You manufactured consent. You were the freaking token leftist for the whole world for decades. And I'm
I mean,
upset I didn't see it,
the
you
Andrew
know?
formerly known as Prince, we expect it from him.
Yeah.
This is he's the result of many generations of breeding in favor of this and of behaving this way. This is Henry VIII and all this stuff. You expect it there,
Yeah.
but you don't. You're not really expecting it from Chomsky, which is why it's dirty.
Yeah, it's dirty. Well, because a lot of the time he was saying the right thing. He was saying the right thing, and he was such a public figure, like, always there and helping, and like, to the point where, like, you would listen. I was just listening the other day to a lecture by what's his name, Finkelstein. Norman Finkelstein, and
Yeah,
Norman Finkelstein was saying, it's like, when I was growing up, when I was coming up, the ideal was Chomsky. Chomsky was peak of our whole.
yeah.
Everyone wanted. He is the best leftist. He is the best academic. He
He's
has
considered one of our
bridged the
greatest
gap,
minds. Yeah.
right? He bridged the gap between hard science and political science. But now that whole legacy and what he represented, it's a sham. And then we also look at the modern state of American leftism,
He was never
which
so
he is the
radical that he got
pinnacle.
kicked out of MIT. Let's just say that.
No, right? Exactly. What was happening with Parenti? Where's Michael Parenti all this time? Michael Parenti's still alive. He was never in no freaking Epstein stuff. And that guy is just as radical and more radical than Chomsky, but no one's ever listening to him.
Yes, and I've met him, and he's also a human being who can be
Yeah.
really annoying. So like the rest of us.
All
As
these people.
my families do this, siblings do this, and so sometimes when I see a whole family, I'll hear like siblings complain about each other. Happens in my own family. You hear one's complain, and you hear the other complain. Last time I had to deal with that, I said, "Well, you know what? I'm more annoying than both of you put together." So there,
Yeah.
because you can't get around it. There's, Wilhelm Reich got drunk and beat up his wife, and Alma doesn't pay her taxes, and at a certain level, if you scrutinize someone, you will be able to see their human frailties and their failings and what they did wrong. As the caregiver of a mentally ill relative, when I saw that Rob Reiner and his wife, uh, it's blood curdling, and this could happen to anyone. And my first question was, what went wrong there? And
Well,
everybody jumped on me like, "Oh, you're victim blaming," and I'm like, "No, no, I'm crisis preventing.
I
I'm
want
the
to know
caregiver."
what
We don't know anything about the brain. Somebody can flip and do that, but
the
it became clear that it was about methamphetamines. It wasn't really,
right. There
anything
was
else.
all this stuff. Apparently, the night before, they were at Conan O'Brien's for a
Yeah,
party,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he caused a scene,
yeah.
and the party ended, and then there was a fight
Yeah.
between Rob and his son, and that's
And
all we
and
know.
then you hear from the siblings that they're going, look, the parents were like, he was never violent. He never did anything violent. And the siblings are like, well, actually, he did. You just made up excuses for him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then the whole family dynamic comes out, and it's very much like any other family dynamic that has mentally ill people in it. There's
And it's
those
so
of us
complicated.
who overestimate their ability to cope, and those of us who underestimate it, and it can be tragic either way.
Right. What blew my mind about this whole situation more than anything was the reaction from the public in terms of Donald Trump and his response.
Oh Jesus.
Because, yeah, okay. Yeah, Donald Trump is the crassest, most vile human being on the planet. We've had this inundated into us for since like forever, forever at this point, since like 2012 when he did his big political turn. Why was this the one that broke through? Why do they care? And then to me, I can't help it's like it's the rich Hollywood famous man. And it's like it's when Trump attacks the rich Hollywood famous man that anyone gives a shit. When he's out there raping kids and abusing women, everyone can throw it under the bus. The man is literally accused of raping a woman in a court of law, legally a rapist, and no one gives an F. But he says a couple bad words on Twitter, and now people are burning their MAGA hats. It's like I don't get it, man.
Okay, well then here you go with celebrity and archetypal space, right?
Mm,
So you get like the star of Malcolm in the Middle. He played the dad. And this
yeah,
whole generation of kids, they're watching this and it's on every day. It's not just on once a week, it's on every day. And this is the dad. This is the after school dad that is there when your dad is not there. Right.
right. Yeah,
Then the next thing he does is he goes and does Breaking Bad. All those kids are teenagers and they're in their 20s now.
yeah, they're
And
primed.
there's no character break. That's that character.
Yeah,
Right. And so it had this impact. It had archetypal impact.
right.
And that's Meathead. Rob Reiner was Meathead. He was in everyone's living room. When I was growing up, we didn't have a TV. We weren't allowed to have TV. I knew who Meathead was. I knew the argument that Archie and Meathead got at the dinner table because it became family conversations between liberals and conservatives at the dinner table.
I only know
This
about it
man
because my
held
parents told me it
archetypal
was
space
racist.
way before Spinal Tap. He
Right,
was your liberal uncle. You
right,
knew him. He was in your living room.
right,
And
right.
so
No, that's
that's
a
where
good
that
point.
comes from.
That's a good point.
And
What was
and
that
and then
show
you
again
get
that
the
he was on?
same kind of extreme reactions to oh, the the trans woman who was an Olympian before, who was the Kardashians' dad.
Oh, right. Chris, or what's her name? I can't think of her name, but Jenner. Um,
Jenner. Nobody
yeah,
gets that Bruce Jenner
Caitlyn.
was on the Wheaties box.
Right,
He was in your face all day, every day when you were growing up. This was the pinnacle of masculinity. That's different from any other person becoming having gender reassignment surgery. The impact that it had was on an identity level because this person held archetypal space. He was Apollo.
right,
He wasn't Bruce Jenner. He was Apollo,
right,
crowned. And so
right.
that's
It's
what
just
happened
these are
with
memes
Robert.
before my time. I didn't grow up with Meathead. I didn't grow up with Jenner. I only saw her after her transition, and I'm like, why would I care about some out of date athlete? You
No.
know, and like Rob Reiner, I know him from he's the guy who did the Princess Bride to me.
Yeah, he's a director. He's a
Right?
director.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, it's just wild to me what hits and what doesn't, you
Yes.
know, and and it just yeah, I don't know. I always feel out of touch with the world, like my priorities are just so different, you know.
Yeah, they're not my Olympians,
Right.
those people. But
Yeah.
I understand that in a lot of families, the television replaces conversation. That was never the issue
Yeah.
in my house. Everybody's all
Very
yelling
true.
at each other, but you take what you can get in, and those people hold archetypal Olympian space, and especially in the absence of religion and culture.
Well,
And
okay. It's so wild. So I remember. I remember there's a book I read a long time ago that was talking about this idea. So in modern religion studies, they're always trying to talk about, okay, so we're dealing with a society that is both still ensnared by religion, but is also in many ways post-religious. You know, so what we see now are these new forms of religiosity and how religion starts to empower and to inform people. And one of the ways it does is with new, the Bible and the
We've gone
Greek.
from ceremonial magic to the Truman Show.
Well, like when I look, I love the humanities and I love literature. So when I look at literature of the past, everyone is talking about or through the Greek myths or through the Bible. That's what they're talking through. If you know the Greek myths in the Bible, you can talk to everyone. It doesn't matter the language. Europe can talk to each other. What we're seeing in the modern American West now. Do you know the Simpsons? Do you know Seinfeld?
These
Do
the
you know,
fairy tales.
do
They're
you
the
know
fairy
Breaking Bad?
tales
You
and
know,
that everybody grew up on.
right? And these are becoming the modern myths that everyone's comparing and thinking and constructing their lives through.
Yeah.
But it's also shifting
And
though.
the Brothers Grimm to Disney, and then
We're
through
seeing another break,
repetition, these myths are now embedded in everybody's psyche.
but we're seeing another break though with the advent of the with the expansion of the internet and streaming, because now for the first time in America we're seeing that people are not sharing in the same television. They're not watching the same things, right? Where it
There's
used to
too
be,
much
right?
variety.
Too much variety. It used to be everyone sat at 6 p.m. When I was a kid, it was The Simpsons, right? When I was a kid, it was The Simpsons. Everyone watched The Simpsons, and if you didn't,
This was
you
our
heard it
best
the
stuff.
next
This
day,
was our hearth that we
right?
gathered around. Yeah.
Right. And if you didn't watch it, you heard about it the next day, or you watched it on repeat. Like everyone
Well,
was
what
into that
happened
for
is
a while.
also is we got a lot more numas
Yeah.
in this generation, and it has to do. I have friends who call it the revenge of the goddess, because it has to do with pollution and additives in food and mistakes we've made about thinking education should be one way or another. But what we have now is a whole bunch of numas. We have a whole bunch of neurodivergent, non-binary, tiny
Right.
house in the woods dwelling, sprout eating folk who are way
Right.
more interested in gathering around an actual fire and
Right.
telling stories, just maybe that they're making up right now, because anything is better than what's on the idiot box.
Yeah.
And they fully comprehended that the more programming you get in the head, the less happy you're going to be, and the harder it is to come up with your own stories.
And we're also seeing the death of we're seeing the unraveling of the myth and the illusion of the myth of America in real time.
Yes.
And this is kind of really shocking to so many people, and it's hard for people to comprehend, because we've had this sort of post World War II hegemony that has been championed by the US, in a post World War II sort of like rule of law that's been established through various organizations like the UN, the IMF, NATO, what have you. But all of these are under attack and are falling apart. All of these are completely failing, and America's turning its
One of the
back
most successful snow
on the rule
jobs
of law.
was FDR, getting everybody
Right.
to think what a great guy he was. And he basically invented the military industrial complex and made the American economy
I
completely
know, but you know
dependent
what?
on arms
He
production.
gave
And
he
everybody
gave
holds him
Americans a
up like he's
cookie,
this
but he gave
Jesus.
white
Right?
America a cookie. This is what
Yeah, yeah,
always upsets me.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
This is what always bloody
Exactly.
upsets me. Okay. We have, and this is a real problem. We have socialists who are national socialists, right? Who say that they are socialists and they want things for everyone, but really they want it for their country. They want it for their own, and they're okay with the big war thing. That kind of socialism is real. Socialism needs to be international. Otherwise, it turns into fascism. It turns into Nazism. If you're out getting a cookie for yourself
It's
at
just
the
straight
at the result of
Brahmanism
other
that
people
the
losing,
untouchables can do
oh.
that, and we're gonna have cake. Yeah.
But this is something that we constantly see in America. We elect the guy who's going to promise us healthcare, who's going to give us more
Oh no, they don't
treats.
want
And
healthcare. They vote against their own healthcare
well,
constantly.
yeah. But I say that because
They
this is
say
such a
healthcare,
big
and
issue.
everyone's like, socialist.
Right, right. But you're seeing a shift in this now because healthcare is so problematic in America. or it's
Are we
becoming a
though? Are
big
they
talking
starting to
event.
vote in favor of their own health
They're
care?
not.
Are they still doing this?
Well, they are in the people like AOC and Bernie Sanders are getting elected, but and now with Mamdani, there is a shift. But the problem is also the system is so corrupt. What we wind up getting is, you get these
We
people
need to
like.
start with a new calendar, and then like all the systems that are built on that, we need to update them to reality.
But this is something that I see in the West often, in both in Canada, the US, in England, in Europe, is you have these people who talk the right thing at home. I want to give you guys rights. I want to give you guys freedom. I want to respect everyone. I want peace and love. But then abroad, it's let's empower our capitalist companies and exploit the rest of the world and just pillage.
I'm
And
really
I'm
hoping
not
it's
okay with
starting to
this,
backfire. I'm watching
right?
all this backlash in Europe of the people deciding that no, we're not going to do this anymore. And part of me says, where were you 40 years ago, and 30 and 20 years ago? But understanding it now is better than not understanding it at all. And I think more people see that now. I don't think that a lot of people actually didn't know that the American economy was dependent on war and bloodshed this whole time.
Right.
They
Well,
didn't.
and,
They
and
actually
it's
didn't know. But
it
because of the internet, and because of library cards and movies and stuff, you
it's
can't
not
pretend
it's
you don't
the
know
entire
anymore.
West. The entire West is
Yes.
dependent upon imperialism,
Well,
and
here's the
we
thing,
all
and
need
that's
to
why they're
be
like, "Oh, let's
waking
cancel
up
the
to this.
Greek program and see if we can get rid of it that way." Right? Like you're gonna pull Mars out of the sky and pretend it's not there, and then that you're gonna solve it like that. No, but it is the rise of patriarchy that is the issue.
Well, we're seeing the full mask off. Why are they getting rid of the Greek and the Latin? Because the Greek and the Latin contain the moral framework and the true philosophical framework that has
'Cause they're gonna
held up our system. Any
it
good ideas we have,
contains the
that's where it's found.
information that you need in order to do the surgery to get it out.
It's
So
depending
if
on
you
war and
think that
bloodshed.
canceling it is going to
Debt
get
is an
rid of the
extension of war.
patriarchy, but instead you are obfuscating the tools you need to understand who you are and to get from who you are to who you want to be.
Right, right, right,
And that's the essence of becoming like gods or these other metaphors.
right,
Is there's you when you're all locked up inside and all you can hear is the echo in your head is something mean someone said to you when you're four, and so you're just not going to draw that picture because that. And then there's the you that is painting with free strokes the sets to your own glamorous theatrical production that is your life.
right. That is thriving and blossoming and enjoying the moment and
And
all of
that's
this
the god like
complexity.
you. That's the
Right.
initiate. That's the twice born.
Yeah.
That's the
Right.
person who is grateful for every stroke because they know what it is to be deprived of one single stroke, even,
Right.
everything. And now they can paint and they're so grateful. And this is the opening piece. People do their prayers complaining. Because I had a bad day and I need you to really, really help me now. And like they're just beggars, this mendicantism masquerading as prayer. No, you got to start with being in a state of gratitude. You can't
Well,
even
yeah.
believe how lucky you are to be alive.
Loving adoration. And when I look at the Greek tradition, right, and I'm going, okay, when do we see the magic spells work, and when do you see them at their most effective? Who is the greatest magician in the entire tradition? Demeter. Demeter raises the dead. How does she raise the dead? She cries her eyes out and runs around like a mad woman, pulling her hair out half naked for a year and a half.
And tantrum yoga. It's a
Demanding,
message across.
demanding,
Yeah.
demanding. I mean, finally,
She's not begging the gods. She's
no,
not negotiation. She's saying,
no,
you motherfuckers.
fuck you.
Yeah.
And she's holding everything back until they listen. She won't allow the seasons
You
to
gotta
change.
get your fluids in it. You gotta get your fluids in it
Right,
somehow. That's these are magical fluids, and this is chemistry. Your blood, sweat, and your tears, and your cum all over your books and your implements, and this is what's going to
or the
make
other
it
one I always
real.
think
It
of
takes it
is
from concept, fluidity to reality.
Another really amazing image for this. It's from the Indian tradition,
Mm.
and it's from the Bhaktis, Radha and Krishna, right? Radha Radha is one of the gopis, the shepherdesses, and Krishna, right, is the divine God, and he's at Leela at play with the shepherdesses, and he falls in love with Radha, and Radha is the ultimate one of these women who falls in love with him. But what they ultimately maintain is an eros of distance. He can never be in full connection with her because he has to be the divine Krishna. He's always off having to serve the world. And so Radha half the time is in this state of just absolute grief. But the grief enlivens her life and makes it worth living. It's like, it's a sign of adoration. The
It's the
very
longing.
act,
It's the sacred longing of the
it's that
body.
longing.
Yeah.
And when she's like, I would rather have the longing, like had she had that connection, that one instant connection with him, and then is not allowed to have it. And then she's always in this grief for the rest of the story. But the grief is empowering and it makes life worth living. That moment was so profound, it was all worth it. And she'd do it again, every single time. And that's the thing. That's that power of love when you take it to the madness point, right? And this is the thing. You see it in both extremes. It's either that love or that anger, or that rage. But either way, it takes you to those extremes. That's where the real magic comes in. That's where the real profound. It's the same thing like we're talking about music. Music
What is
can
the same people
send
do
you.
meditation thing is going to make their emotions go away.
I
And
know. This
instead,
part of the
what
problem.
happens is your emotions become stronger.
Yeah.
It's just that you know they're going to pass because it's
Right.
waves. And so you're have to be less attached because it's
Yeah.
coming as this big wave and it's so powerful. And then you're like, when you make yourself fluid and it passes. But no, it doesn't make your feelings go away at all. You don't become impartial and indifferent through
No.
practice.
The Buddha tells you this. He just develops this ability to recognize himself and let it go.
He just doesn't
Right?
make a big fucking deal about it. Yeah.
Right. He still gets angry. He just doesn't, the anger doesn't come to the surface,
Yeah.
He still gets fearful. You're still a bundle of, you're still a human being relying on pheromones, like a lot of that is out of your control, you know? So it's wild, wild stuff. But ultimately, we need to be in this connection with each other. We need to have that passion, and we need, so much.
Well,
What
yeah.
I
So
see,
you were taking the Numa story somewhere to where like the actual building of the temple,
yeah.
like their instructions embedded in the story for the building of the temple, and I'm really curious how you see that.
So, well, this also connects to the Hestia stuff. So, when I was looking, I want to go right back to the very, 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 very beginning, the earliest that I can find in the Greek myths, and this is where you get to the Pelasgians, the pre-Greeks, who are sort of this Aboriginal tribal people who coexist with the Greeks, but predate them, and they
And they're
consider
about
them sharing a
the
similar
snakes
language,
and the wolves.
right? And the Pelasgians were said to have this massive Mediterranean kind of. What they did was, so you get this. I'm trying to remember his name. What was that guy's name? It's gonna bug me. I wrote it down. Him. Let me see here. But anyway, so there's this character who is sort of the what we call like the architect of the Pelasgian society. He was the first one who was inspired, and he's inspired by Hestia. Okay, the first thing that he does in order to, he's the guy who builds the very first city, and in order to build the first city, I'll find this quote here. He winds up building a temple he builds this thing. It's called the Prytaneum, which is a public hearth, and this is where they would also do the various rites to like,
Public hearth, like a barbecue, or
where you'd make bread
okay,
mostly, but
okay.
sometimes you would also do barbecue rites. But the big thing they would do in the
It's an
Pelasgian tradition,
oven.
it's a massive oven, and it's where you would cook all your big food for everyone,
I see.
but you would also do all your religious rites here, and you would cremate the dead here. So they
Okay.
would burn the dead in the hearth, and then they would take the skulls and place them around the hearth. And so the hearth was also the seat of the Lares, the spirits of the ancestors,
Uh-huh.
right? And this was the heart of every Pelasgian city. And we can
Uh-huh.
see all across the Mediterranean, every place where this particular people
The big
set up
pile of
shop.
bones by the oven.
You
Wow.
find a big oven in the center of town surrounded in bones.
I've never heard this before.
And it's all over. It's all over the place. You find them. The Pelasgians go as far as Iran, and they
Yeah.
go as far as Spain.
Yeah.
It's really wild how all over the place they were. And I was really looking into this whole thing. I was like, okay, so how did they build the temple? What was the start of the temple? And the first thing they did was it was about building that communal hearth,
Well, and so,
connecting
but these are the
to
same guys
Hestia,
that
the
built the
first
water.
and the
They
last.
built water temples too.
Okay, so I found his name. It's Phoronesis,
Okay.
Phoronius. And it says, Phoronius, son of Anarchus, first made arms for Juno, and because of this obtained the authority to rule. So they changed the goddess. Sometimes it's Hestia, sometimes it's Hera, Juno, sometimes it's Isis, right? It says, um, it gets all wild. Here's from Pausanias. Next to the statue is a fire which they keep burning, calling it the fire of Phoronesis, for they do not admit that the fire was given to mankind by Prometheus, but insist in assigning it to the discovery to Phoronesis, who was gifted the fire by Hestia.
Okay.
So the story is it parallels Numa. All of a sudden, the ancient Pelasgian myth, you got this guy Phoronesis who goes out into the wilderness, connects to the muse. She tells him to build a temple to light that spark, that fire, and that's what it is. It's the fire is the heart of the temple.
Right.
It's the heart of the home. It's what unites us. And the big thing with these cities that they would build, they'd have this Prytanium, and then anytime they created a new city, you had to go back to Phoronesis' hearth. You had to
And
take
get
the
the
fire
fire.
from that original flame
So
and
that's
bring
where
it.
they get Olympian, running with the
All of
flame
this
from
eternal fire stuff, it goes
uh,
all the way back to Phoronesis. And this predates the Prometheus myth, right?
yeah.
This is a man who discovered fire with the help of the muse. And, the Pelasgians are also the ones who found Rome, because later on, I didn't finish the story, but the muse Carmentis Nicostrate, she has a child and it's going to be killed. So she is going to be killed because there's a challenge to the throne and in the Pelasgian thing, and she's forced to flee. So they run away in order to save her son, because her son kills his father or something. I'd have to reread the myth, but Evander and Carmentis flee Greece, like the Pelasgian area of Greece, and they come to Latium, the marshes, to hide in the marshes, to hide from the forces of the Pelasgians who are out to kill him. And this is where, the story then she
So it's
becomes
the
a
people in the
prostitute.
land of the marshes that have the water temples that are
Yeah,
also 5,000 years old.
right. And there's this
I
connection with the
see.
Pelasgians, so they're saying that they took that same spark and they brought it. So the
Right.
spark of Hestia, they took it from ancient Pelasgia and they
Across
brought
the
it to
Aegean.
Rome,
Okay.
across the Aegean, lit it in the grove of Egeria,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then that's what creates Rome.
Right. But then the Rheacilia story is much later, where her great great
Much later.
grandfather comes from Troy
Right.
with the doll, right? The palace
Right.
that's not Athena.
Yeah,
And
no, sorry, it's the same story. It's basically the same story. There's just multiple versions of this, but yeah, Pallas, and they come from Troy.
yeah.
Well, but again, it's this Pelasgian root. It gets all convoluted. I'll send you some of the sources that I have. I have to go back over
So
them.
the temples that you find all over central Italy
Mhm.
that are from that era that they say Pelasgian to, there's just Proto-Etruscan. The
Right.
Etruscans didn't know how they had made them, but they're all the same, and they have two tubs on the top, and one tub is a little bigger, and they're connected, and then one has a drain, and it drains through the rock, and it has little little tubes going through it, which is bizarre, and no one knows how they did that because they curve and they're all the same exact, width all the way through. It's a tube that is carved through there. and
Right.
and then they also have little rivulets on the outside, so there's places where the water is trained to drip around the temple and fill another tub inside, and no one knows who made them, but they're all over central Italy, the two
Wow.
tubs and then this intricate drainage system, and then a cave underneath that is clearly an initiatory cave. Then they have caves with multiple tubs in them that are clearly a hippogam that is an initiatory cave. And then they
Oh,
have little niches in the walls that are for obviously for candles or for images of deities. And these are they're all carved into solid rock. The Etruscan pyramid, way before the Etruscans, carved into solid rock. It's not blocks that have been brought there. And so this is the marsh people that these fire people would have found when they came to Latvia.
right. But there's also this other wild myth that I just remembered. So in Virgil and in Ovid, they talk about this where I told you about the story of Tacita where she's cast out and falls from the heavens
Mm,
into the marshes.
mm.
Well, there's an earlier version of this, and it happens to Saturn. Saturn is cast out by the primordial Zeus, not his son Zeus, primordial Zeus.
Mm.
This is where, because Zeus is really a title, and there are many
Yeah,
Zeuses,
so see that's yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there is a Zeus before the child of Kronos, Zeus, and it says that he casts Saturn to Earth,
But
and
isn't Saturn Kronos?
Saturn is Kronos.
Right.
But in the Roman, he takes on a slightly different story. There's this whole myth of him descending to Earth and becoming this grain god. You don't see so in the Greek, he's Kronos, the giant and Orphic time. He's the
Yeah.
one who slays Uranus, castrates him, which and divides the universe, right?
All the
Divides
time.
the
Yeah.
universe. Okay. In the Roman, he is this, you know, Macrobius says this explicitly, says that the Romans considered Chronos, time, and their Saturn the same, and
Uh-huh.
there's no distinction. I remember that was one of the first thing I asked Ammon because in my religion studies, they were like, no, 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 no. Orphic Chronos is different from the Saturn Chronos, is different
Okay.
from the Greek Titan Chronos. And Ammon is like, no, they're all the same.
They're all
And
Kronos.
they're
And
all
this is
Chronos.
Athena is born out of his head, right?
No, that
No,
Athena is born out of Zeus's head.
Zeus's head.
Kronos'
Okay.
son Zeus, though, the not the title Zeus, because this is
Not
where
his
things
father
get loose.
Zeus. Right.
Right. So in the story, what ends up happening is Saturn gets cast out of Olympus, falls to Later, to the marshes, is hidden in the marshes. And this is where he brings the golden age. He starts the golden age, right? And this leads to this time. And the Romans are always waxing poetic about the golden age, where everyone got to live in this incredible time where it's kind of like an agricultural matriarchal society is what they describe it as, before there's money, before there's any of this stuff. But what ends up happening though is Saturn kind of ruins it. He
Yeah.
institutes it, but he also ruins the golden age. Because in the story, what ends up happening is he wants to maintain power and he tries to subvert the system and he devours his kids and then he gets slain, right? And Zeus has to take over, So he both institutes the golden
It's
age and
hard being
ends
hard
the
out
golden,
there being a patriarch.
right? He
Pretty
institutes it and
soon.
you know so Saturn is a really complicated figure, especially so he's more negative in the Greek, but in the Roman he has this very dualistic nature where he is Santa. He's in the Saturnalia, he's basically Santa Claus. For this whole week he's giving everyone gifts. You're all getting drunk and having a great time. You're burning little wax effigies. He comes to bestow us with his wealth, but he is also the god that. So this is the thing too, is that
He's drunk dad and then he's hungover dad. He's
what
he's
ends up
the
happening.
provider, he's a great agricultural provider, and then he's also the scythe. He's also
Yeah.
Father Time is death.
You know what he does is he institutes what becomes the main things of the Silver Age.
See,
So
this is
he
why
brings in
I
agriculture.
disagree with the primacy of the female grain gods. I think there is male and female grain gods.
Yeah.
There's
Oh
male and
yeah.
female water
Absolutely.
gods. There's male and female fire gods, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So with Saturn, what ends up happening is, but he becomes the one who establishes the banks. So in the later traditions in Rome, he sticks around, even though he becomes displaced by Zeus, but now he is in charge of the banks. He's in charge of the hierarchies, the divisions of labor. He's the one who's setting up all of the authoritarian stuff that we
Yeah.
dislike in many
Yeah.
ways. So on one end, he is the guy who institutes the golden age, but he ends it. He's also the god of, he is
Because
Santa.
we
He's
need
the
a
god
little
of money.
structure, but
He's the
we
god of
don't
money.
thrive
Right?
with too much.
He's the one who divides, right? Time leads to knowledge, it leads to power. He is that shepherd god. He is that agriculture god. It's complicated.
Well, it's just that's the dad archetype too. Like
Yeah.
the provider dad is the dad we like, and the good dad who criticizes everything we say is the one that
Well,
we're
a
dreading
lot of
seeing.
people struggle with that Zeus image. And I
Mm.
remember, I was struggling with that Zeus image for a long time. And then I was
And
meditating
we've
upon.
talked about how probably the rape and the definition of rape is later introductions as part
Oh
patriarchy
yeah.
develops, and this is not,
It's
part of
not
the
as explicit.
vernacular even at all in
Right.
the beginning. Yeah.
But there is this idea, we see this, for example, explicitly within the tarot. What the Zeus character represents is authority and power. And authority and power can be that energy that builds you a foundation, that unites us with a vision, that uplifts us and protects us, that can be that
He's the
foundation
king.
upon
He's the
which we
king
become
archetype. Yeah.
ourselves.
He's the king.
So that king can uplift you and be the loving father,
Yeah.
or he can be the city upon which we live can either be that thing that allows us to become ourselves or that impresses us. Zeus can either be the tyrant or the loving father. He's kind of both.
Well, and this is why we need a pantheon. It's because
Yeah.
it's really in the balance of all the elements that health is created, that happiness can occur.
Right.
And then we have all these stories about we need this element, and if it gets out of hand, this is what will happen.
Well, this is also why, they talk about too. It's one of the wilder things is again, when we're looking at the children of the gods and you're looking at these generations, they're all interconnected. Just as we talked about how Gaia, Hera, and Rhea, they're all similar energy. When you're talking about Zeus, you also have to talk about Artemis, Athena. You have to talk about Apollo, and you have to talk about Dionysus.
None of these exist in a vacuum.
Right? You got to talk about those energies because they all represent aspects of Zeus. Zeus is Dionysus, Zeus is Apollo, Zeus
And
is
before
Athena,
you
Zeus
have
is
Romulus
Artemis.
and Remus, what do you have? You have Apollo and Artemis. That doesn't sound the same at all. How does this work, right?
Because what they're talking about is that primal story from the one comes two.
Yes.
It's the Hestia myth, the great mother, the fire gives birth to the spirits. That's the myth of creation. That's the founding of Rome. That's the birth of our stories. We all gathered around the spark. That's it. And that's how we build the temple is we relight the spark. This is what I've been trying. So
in a practical sense, what does that mean for you? Like the spark, it happens when you do these invocations. That is my experience.
Absolutely.
The spark happens when you do it, and then it gives it lights other things on fire. Like Teilhard de Chardin said, the truth has only to appear in one heart for it to spark in others and light everything ablaze. And it's like that. But you're talking about an actual physical space, like a building, right?
Right. So that is a later idea that will come eventually. But so this whole thing, it comes in multiple levels. So how it was first revealed to me when I contacted the muse, she took me to Christine de Pizan. And Christine de Pizan has two great books that focus on this. One is called The City of Ladies, which is how you construct the temple in the body, in the mind, in the heart. Right? It's how you break free of the propaganda and recognize the divine feminine. How you build, and that's where it's got to start. You first
and
light
failing
the
all
spark in the
else,
heart.
you can always build the temple right here.
Exactly. And that's where it's got to start. You got to cultivate that connection with the muse. Then the next thing is in the home. In the home. Now, the next place you can do is connect to the spirits of your ancestors and of your place, of around you, and bringing in the gods. The gods can be tricky to connect. Some people connect easier, but by setting up a home shrine and by setting up a regular ritual, you have now opened up my biggest thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure you notice the same thing. The biggest thing with people is they're not listening, they're not in conversation, they're not in friendly, reciprocal energy. If you develop a friendly, welcoming space and you're inviting the spirits in, you'll have experiences.
Yes.
This is how you got to do it.
Nobody
So,
wants to hear that it starts with clean your room.
but that's what it started. I hate to sound like that dick, but because I'm Canadian and I cannot stand, I won't even say his name, but
You gotta
it
clean
does
your
start with
room,
cleaning your
and
room.
then and then you got the whatever you consider an altar, and
Right.
it's got fire, and it's got water, and it's got air, and then you get many people, many points of light doing that, and it creates some kind of a grid. So that's you're at this
Exactly.
building stage now. You're
Right.
building it
Exactly.
in the lines of connection.
And so, my wife and I were both really deeply inspired by this. This is not just of my idea, and also our community has been deeply inspired by this. And so, one of the ways in which we are doing this is we are trying to give people, the original heart, like in the Pelasgian tradition, you went back to that original temple to Hestia, Juno, to Hera, Hestia, right? That's where it all starts. So we are trying to do that same thing. So we were
So
inspired with this idea. We want to,
you need web weavers
yeah,
for that. In the Wiccan tradition, they call them web weavers. I see a lot of clients, and only occasionally I'll see a client that feels the energy work that I'm doing
right,
and can actually articulate, oh, it feels like this element, or it's I see this color of light.
right,
And so those are your web weavers, and people who can see it and feel it can be trained to light up the web. So you've got a certain number of points of light, people in their homes at their hearth with their candle and their god image and their glass of water, and then a web weaver can light up the lines of connection between them and create a pulse and a flow, or not create, create a container for a pulse and a flow that then grows into a community vibe.
exactly. And that's what I'm seeking to do. That with the community and with the in the new year, I'm going to be expanding these adorations that I've been doing and trying to. The whole idea is I want to get people to actually light candles with me. If you sit with me and you're watching me and I'm doing a little tarot reading and saying a prayer, reading some poetry, you're engaged in a
Yeah.
ritual action. If you
Yes.
light a candle in your home too, we are now, we are uniting across time and space. That's a
That's why
beacon
I
that's going
like
to
to have it. I
scream,
like that you
you
do
know?
it like almost every night. And
Yeah,
so I can just turn it on and I'm cooking dinner and I've got my candle lit and I'm doing my evening things. But this is like it's a pulse of connection. And I know that everybody else is also at their hearth. And it's very comforting to me. I find it illuminating.
right. And this is the thing. We are all, you know, and I want to connect it to this kind of primordial idea. What I want to break it down to, it's the great mother, the twins, and the muses. And to me, this is that the one duality and generation. We're seeing that expansion.
Yeah.
They're all connected, but they're all different in that
One,
ever
two, three, four,
generating
five,
flow.
six,
And
seven. Yeah.
eventually you get to us in that generation. And it's like this is what we're worshiping. We're connecting to that flow of life. We're going back, and by going back we're connecting to it all. We're going through that primal ancestral line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is what the whole thing is. And eventually we
And if
create
you
the
get
temple
in an
community.
actual river, you don't need the experience of someone pushing you around to have that
Right,
feeling.
right.
You
Yeah,
get in the waves and you get in there with a little boogie board. Don't start with a real board. It's going to hit you on the head. Get a boogie board. And the amount of time that you spend waiting for that wave is the amount of time you need to meditate. And the wave is going to take you under. it's going to kick you around, or you're going to ride it in. And anyway, that's still dancing with the element. And it's just that it takes a lot of hanging out more than people think.
So one of the wilder things I remember reading about is there's this really cool place near where I live on the Great Lakes, and it's a magical shaman spot that was used by the Haudenosaunee people, or sorry, the Ojibwe, and it was a gateway to the underworld where they would worship. It was called the Underwater Panther, who's like this kind of dragon snake creature thing. And what they would do at this place, it's in the midst of this deep jungle, right on the bank of the lake, and it's on the sheer rock face where they would paint all these pictures that they could meditate upon. But they would sit on the ledge of this rock and wait for the tide to come in.
Mm.
And the idea was is you would meditate until the tide overtook you. And in the moment the tide overtook you, you were supposed to enter the underworld. And people would die. This was like at least that's the myths. No one has
Yeah.
ever, this is the story that the people tell you. But these shamans would go there to cross into the underworld. And they're engaged in this intense meditation where the water could come and kill them. It's just wild to think about.
Well, see, there's all kinds of ways to get to that feeling of surrender that
Right.
don't involve subjecting yourself to any kind of abuse.
No, that's true. You don't need to go
And
that
so,
far,
but
but
they're
some
having
people want
initiation.
to,
That's the thing. That's that
right?
delicate thing of
Yeah.
initiation is that you need it to take you to the brink and not any further.
Well, this is where it gets interesting with that idea of theater and magic. Like one of the themes we want to talk about is, the sex, the drugs, and the rock and roll.
Yeah,
Well, when
man.
I'm thinking about this, I always go to the Indian tradition. What really inspired me in the beginning for a lot of this magical stuff was in the Indian tradition. They have the path of the aesthete,
Mm.
those who appreciate the art, and this connects to the tantrika in a deep way. One of these philosophers is this guy Abhinavagupta, and he was really all about utilizing the vehicle of myth and creating these portals in which you can transcend to the divine in the same way that like we're reading books, but they're turning it into this four-dimensional theater, where they're performing the plays, they're engaging in the plays, they're engaging in the smell and the drugs, they're creating this whole performance where you can experience death, you can experience war, you can experience rebirth
Right.
without being there. You're
Yeah.
in that cave, you're in that theater of the mind, but also a real theater,
Yeah.
and it was high art that
Yes.
led to a took you to a transcendental place, you know?
Yeah. Because you're not in yourself.
No, exactly.
All of your attention is on someone else, and that is what mothers experience. That's why we experience it. That's why motherhood can be a path to awakening. Is the annihilation of the self, and
And
that can be achieved through theater. It's fascinating to me, and it's totally
right.
real. Also, music. That's why the
Yeah.
music is so important in the early initiations because you've got waves going through your body. It's changing your cells and shaking you all that detritus loose, all the junk floating around inside that we don't need, and the wasteful thoughts. And the only thing that survives this intense sound wave is your real self, your actual real thoughts.
Right. Right. It's wild. It's wild. And I think about, in terms of just I wanted to ask you about this because this is something that I keep seeing and thinking about lately is this idea of the muse seems to impact everyone, but most people do not realize it. Some people become full conduits of the muse for a period and then they completely flip and they lose it. You see this often with like artists and musicians, where they're like, you know,
Some of
some
them just do one good album and then go around playing that for the rest of their lives.
right. Well, some artists, you got to, okay. I look at someone like Jimi Hendrix and I read some of his lyrics. He's the voodoo child. He's calling the spirit of the wind to transform him into an icon.
Yeah.
He asked for his own. If you do that, you're asking for your own death, man. You
Yeah.
ask to be made an icon. It's
If
like,
you want
oh,
immortality, you have to die for that. Yeah.
yeah, right. And he got what he wished for. The wind cried Mary, and he became a star, right? But wow, right? And you see this in that in rock and roll and in music a lot, right? A lot of this Apollonian magic,
And
engaging with
the
that.
one who went to the crossroads who created the group field that is rock and roll.
Right. Exactly. Right. And this stuff can be so freeing and enlightening, but it can also be so it has that Apollonian love, but it also has that Dionysian wildness. You know, you look at it.
You got Keith Richards who turned 82 today.
Right, right. Well, I think about
And
one of
did
the
he go into it with any less annihilation? No.
right, right. Well, you've got to wonder too. Like some of these characters, when I look at the Rolling Stones, the real magical character in the Rolling Stones is Brian Jones. Brian Jones, who died young.
Okay.
Right, who blew himself up. He wrote Ruby Tuesday and whatnot. But why Brian Jones is so interesting is he became the patron saint for the Temple of Psychic Youth. You know, I'm sure. Are you familiar with Genesis Peorage?
Yes.
They were that trans.
Yeah,
well,
I remember that.
Pandragine.
I remember the Temple of Psychic Youth. Yeah.
They're one of the most radical witches in modern history, and their guru was Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones. You know,
and was this because he died?
Yeah,
yeah,
and well, he became.
And does the crazy Pink Floyd guy count? I mean, he's out of commission. Did you have to die?
Counts. Do you don't have to die. You don't have to die. Well, some people don't die. They okay.
Robert Johnson died, but when he did that magic, he created a group field.
What we see though
wasn't there before. Like Hilmoth Klimp created modern art,
I look
at magical act.
You know who I think is a real
magus? And they sacrificed their whole self for it, right?
You know who I think was a real magus and was able to do it pretty well is David Bowie. And you know what David Bowie used to do? He used to sacrifice his characters. He used to have them live and die.
Do it with an onion, bruh, not with your brain.
Exactly. You don't offer yourself to the gods. You offer Ziggy Stardust to the gods. You know?
Right? It's the Dolly magic.
Right? And that's why, and it was never about David. It was always about the characters and the art he created.
That's right. And he was a method actor too. He would completely be that guy.
Right? He would be completely that pair. And some of those characters were ugly, man. Like the Thin White Duke was a fascist, crazy person.
Anorexic, cokehead,
right.
Yeah.
It's totally wild stuff.
And this is how you inhabit archetypal space without it eating you alive.
Right.
Because you can't believe in yourself. The solidity of the self. He had a level of awakening where he didn't believe in the solidity of the self, and it made it easier. The fluidity and being he's pretty non-binary. Being trans or non-binary helps because the self is fluid in nature.
Another ridiculously powerful magus that doesn't get talked about enough because he's a problematic person is John Lennon. But John Lennon of the Beatles was a pure wit. When he hooked up with Yoko, that was a force of serious. Yoko, I think, is one of the most powerful witches of the last.
She went to Biennale like 2 years ago. She is way beyond all that. She's an artist in her own right with a social impact. That's way greater than his because it's a more longevity thing.
Well, you know what is that his art took on its most profound and most magical aspects when she came around. She co-wrote Imagine. She wrote almost all of the lyrics to that song. And he admitted it later.
She was like 80 years old and the photographers caught her playing piano in a dive bar south of Market in San Francisco at 3 a.m. She's a real one.
Okay, well, I went to Iceland, right? I'm a huge John Lennon fan. When I was younger and I was into that Christian stuff and I was in a real dark place, that song Imagine saved my life. It was
I sang that song in front of my whole junior high.
Wow.
And I
You
played
know,
it on the piano.
it's not a perfect song, but it hit
It's a great
me
song.
when I needed it, you know, and it was at that moment for me, you know. But just while, you know, because I was
And
also
this
just
is
very
also he's talking about people occupy archetypal space. I have a friend who's a
right.
storyteller, and she tells the story. She was there. She was one of those teenage girls screaming for the
Yeah.
Beatles. Like you see the footage in the black and
But you
white.
know,
These girls are you're like, do they have parents? How did they let them? They didn't let them out of the house. These girls escaped from their home en masse. And
right?
she
This
was
is
one
what
of
I
them.
mean.
And they're running down the street and they're like a whole pack of them. And they saw a line of cops at the end. And the cops saw this wave, this tsunami of core coming
Yeah.
for them. And they took off running. The cops took off running. And she said, at that moment, I understood the power of the maiden.
Right. Well, you know, the Beatles were the first boy band. They really took the rock icon to its nth degree, you know, and they were challenging the world and bringing radical
They
ideas of
they
peace and love.
unleashed the power of the core. She said it
Yeah.
wasn't about the Beatles anymore. Once
No.
they started screaming, ripping their shirts off, these are teenage girls in a Bacchic frenzy.
But
And
you know what
they
else
are
though?
having a transcendental experience. And it's not about the Beatles or the Grateful Dead anymore.
No, no, no. Well, you know, I think that you know, we also have to talk about the boogeyman, the patriarchal system that tries to control, you know, I think that that system killed John Lennon. I think he was
Oh,
assassinated, and I
oh.
think they've worked systematically to destroy and make him seem like a greater monster than he ever was. Like he's a
It's
human
dangerous.
being,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he's
The
and he's
degree of social impact that he had, the degree of archetypal space was dangerous. And
exactly, and
and
so he had to
Wilhelm
be
Reich, it's
destroyed.
same thing. All of a sudden, he gets put in jail and
It's
he
you
dies in
know,
there.
I
And,
watched this
and
happen in my own life.
they didn't want to hear about the next thing because
The
the
same
sexual revolution was enough for them. They didn't want to hear about cancer.
right, and they've been doing this. They did the same thing to Gandhi. They did the same thing to Gandhi. You know, Gandhi's a
Also a
complicated
mess.
person.
If you put him under a microscope, that guy's a fucking mess. But whatever.
Exactly, he's a mess, but he's all human beings are messes, you know, and you know,
Mostly,
like
yeah.
you
Most of us
cannot detract from the
are pretty
let's talk
messy.
about his ideas. Let's talk
Yeah.
about his ideas. Let's talk about the impact,
Yeah.
right? But
See, but it's like
they
with Chomsky,
used
does it matter that he was a racist? Does that color your
I know
interpretation
this
of
is
his ideas anymore? Like with Chomsky, like can
I
you
know.
now that you know that he's the Louis C.K. Of philosophy, as a friend of mine just joked today, does it change how you're going to filter through his ideas, right?
To a certain extent, because now I see him as the thing he was fighting against. He manufactured consent. You know, that's what he did, right? And we have
Or
to
at least he's
recognize
hanging
that.
out with people who are interested in that idea for all the wrong reasons, and he knows that, and he goes, "I'm speaking to that."
Yeah. Well, we also have to remember the extraordinary, you know, when you listen, you know, if you look at Dion and I got a little too deep into the Epstein stuff, and it's ugly.
Oh my god.
And you know, Epstein
I
is a
saw every
narcissist,
episode of that. That was
right?
horrifying.
Epstein is a narcissist of near
Yeah, but
unimaginable
he's just
proportion.
one cog in a wheel.
I know, but what I'm trying to say is like this is a guy who I could see him talking to Chomsky and being like, all of this is for the purpose of bringing about a liberal hegemony, and I'm a good person, and I wanted to good, and I have these money to do. He really believed that he could. This
Well,
is a
there are
guy who
lots of
can write
academics
quotes.
that say,
This
"Hold
is a
up,
guy who could
this
destroy
guy
young
paid me to
women and
come to
then talk
his
about
ranch and
liberal
lecture, and I didn't
politics.
know what it was, and I didn't do anything." And there are lots of academics that are coming because he was interested in AI and in mathematics and in physics and in all this astro stuff.
Oh yeah, he had his finger on the pulse of anything that was big and popular, right?
Yeah,
He wanted to be anything that he thought was going to change the world. You
yeah.
know, big reason why he was talking to Chomsky was because Chomsky is the godfather of linguistics, right? He's the greatest linguist of our generation, and this is undisputable. So if you're going to talk about AI and large language models, who better to be working with than Chomsky, right? And so many people have been utilizing Chomsky for
And
the
who's
AI.
the other one, the astrophysicist too? That all of a sudden you're like, that dude, I didn't even know
Well,
that guy
that
could
astrophysicist, I
walk.
know who you're talking about, but that guy's creepy. Like a lot of these scientists are also, you know, I don't know, all these
Saturn,
people.
and Saturn is you get cold that way, and all of a sudden, like, you can only give birth to your children from your brain, like, you know what I mean? They're your intellectual children because you never hug them, and
Well,
Saturn can get overactivated and get real cold.
oh yeah, until I confronted the Rhea aspect of that energy, Saturn isolates you. He disconnects you from everyone. He sends you into the depth. And, for me as a Virgo, that didn't feel too uncomfortable at first. But
Right.
eventually, it's like that energy makes people repulsed from you. It pushes everyone away. You become like vile in a way, like people don't want to be around you. You exude that
Cold is
negative.
not sexy. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But what that Saturnian energy has is it has the knowledge and it has the power. It's that energy, in the dark. It's complicated stuff. Saturn is that force of time that's ever sneaking up behind you with the knife, forcing you to move. And as soon as you stop moving is when he strikes,
So
you
what's
know?
the difference? Because there's a death figure in Greek magic that has greatly influenced the cult of La Nina.
Yeah, Thanatos. So Thanatos is the
Yeah.
good death, is the good.
Yeah.
Saturn is
So but
not the
that's
good
different from
death. Yeah,
Saturn, right?
yeah.
They
Saturn is
both
the
have a
great
side,
divider.
but it's not the
Yeah.
same fella.
No, no. So what Thanatos is Thanat. So what we see in a lot of like the later occult stuff is they combine the boatman, right? The ferryman. What's his? I can't think of his name right now.
Going over the sticks.
Yeah,
Mm,
but they combine the ferryman with Thanatos, who is a
mm.
good daimon. He's the god
Yeah.
of good death, and
Yeah.
so he was seen as an angelic figure who would help people. Like in the Orphic tradition, you could pray to Thanatos, and
Right.
he would help. He'd help. The big thing in the
And
Orphics,
the
right? You don't
image
want to
it
drink.
looks is like a skeleton in a cloak, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
you don't want to drink from the bad river
Yeah.
of forgetfulness. You
And
want to
here's
drink from the
so
good river of
interesting.
memory.
This gets off the boat in Mexico, and they're like, "Oh, we have one, but it's a her."
Right,
And it's
right,
the same. It's the cloak of
right.
the sky and the skeleton. Instead, we
Mhm.
call her La Flaca and the pretty little girl. It's not a mother goddess. This is not your mom.
Karen.
It's
Karen is his
it's
name,
it's La Nina. She's a
But this
pretty
is so
fast.
interesting to me is that, like, this spirit of Thanatos and Karen also merge in the figure of the Grim Reaper, right? The
Yes,
Grim Reaper is
it's the
not
same image.
not a religious character, but it's this mythological
Yeah.
Western character. It's
Yes.
really interesting how
And
this
it's
works.
mostly gamblers that have a dialogue with the Grim Reaper or the rider, dark rider at the crossroads.
Mhm,
Yeah. But
right?
then it's all these
But there's
different
also this
versions
Hermes
of it.
energies too, right? Because Hermes is also, and Hecate because they're psychopomps. They carry you across the
Yeah.
crossroad. They
See.
carry you to the next place.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of complicated stuff there. It's interesting. But you see, like, when you look at the Spanish Mexican, or sorry, the indigenous Mexican traditions, like, yeah, the goddess of death is just, it's the same energy, it's the same. I see her as the Corey, she's that same because the Corey
And so
has two
that's
sides
why
to
they
her,
call her the little girl. Yeah.
right? The Corey has two sides to her.
Yeah.
You see this in the color magic, right? She's called the chloro. And what does that mean? Chloro is the yellow green, but it's a specific yellow green. It's the
Oh,
fresh
so.
budding of spring. So when the grass brings up the fresh shoots, but it's also the first sign of rot on meat when the meat starts to green,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
same color. And this is also, they use that same word in Revelation to describe death. Death rides it's not a pale horse, it's a yellow green horse. It's the chloro, it's the magic of Persephone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is a very specific image, right? And
But
that
yeah,
image always shows you the
we also
duality of death
have
and
somebody
spring.
giving birth to twins, and then we also have Love God with a crown of thorns, and we also have a lady with the snake hair and the snake skirt, and so it's interesting to me. Some there are lots of theories that there's just a whole lot more contact than we previously thought, And these are not just swimming around the collective unconscious and, emerging in dreams in a Jungian sense, but we're actually passing these mythologies more physically than we previously thought. And I think that's intriguing possibility. But I think
Right.
it's also possible because it's happened to me in doing ritual magic and over the course of a process that people will have dreams that
Right.
they don't know that story, but the story comes
Right.
out in their dream, like the way I write that story and later I find out that it corresponds to what we know about that story. And so it's very interesting to me how does that happen?
I
Clearly
often,
inspiration
yeah.
is bubbling up from a common knowledge pool.
This is the thing, because like I remember, you can see the parallels between the Greek and the Mexican, but
Mm.
the Mexican indigenous, but you can also see the parallels like with the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, right? The Haudenosaunee, they have this whole myth about the great peacemaker who comes to unite everyone.
Yeah.
And it's a wild story because
And he's
he has to
Medusa.
go.
He's got snakes for hair.
Well, he's got to go fight this evil shaman who has the snakes for hair, who's called I can't remember his name, but there's a guy who comes to comb the
Hiawatha.
snakes. Yeah, or yeah. So Hiawatha is the one who combs the snakes out of the bad guy's hair. I'm trying to remember the bad guy's
Okay.
hair. Yeah, so there's the great peacemaker is Deganawida. Then there is Hiawatha, who is like his partner, who's like the warrior, who actually does most of the fighting. And then there is the girl, the virgin, Jigan Sase.
Now, then some people say the snakes in the hair is a metaphor because the Scythians kept their arrow poison in their dreads.
Yeah.
And so they're taking their arrow and they're pulling it through the dread with the poison on it, and then they're shooting it. And so,
Right.
there's snake venom in the arrow poison, and that's how we got confused with the hair and snakes.
Well, there's all this weird stuff, okay? When you look at the Greek word drakon, dragon, right? What does it mean? What does it actually mean?
What
Well, if
does
you
it?
go when it has to do with the site. It has to be with it literally means the word Dracon, it has to do with the constellation Draco, but it also means that to see, to look and to stare. It had to reference these serpents that would cause you to be turned to stone. It's literally a reference to the Medusa. But there's this whole magical thing that's implied here. Because what is the essence of the feminine tradition? It's the image. It's the sacred image, as opposed to the masculine, which is the magical word. The feminine doesn't write its traditions down. It transposes them through tapestry and through idols. And it's the masculine, the tradition is that's then doing everything in the legalistic and writing things down. And this is a lot of scholars will even talk about that the patriarchy begins and destroys the matriarchy when we switch to the written word. It's because they could control the writing and weaponize this against the feminine.
The goddess versus the alphabet. That kind
right? So there's this whole thing with the dragons and this idea of seeing, of the right seeing. And we see this also in the magic, right? You have to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. To be a dragon priest, right? Originally, the dragons, this word always referred to the priestesses, the Medusae. That's why it has to do with the turning to the stone. But it got all conflated with monsters. If you go back to its ancient root, it's about the priestesses. And it's about being able to see clearly, to be able to see the world unveiled with that eyes of the goddess, And so there's clearly also a drug reference here, of some kind, At least that's what Ammon is claiming, It's from the Durkomai to see, right?
And
So
does it necessarily involve the Christing in the eyes?
well, this is this is something that people can speculate on.
That's
We
the
don't
question.
know, right? I would say, yeah. I would almost certainly say, yeah. It has to do with this Christing in the eye, because what makes someone a dragon? right? You have the ability to
I know
see.
people
How
who
do you
take
gain that power to
LSD as
see?
eye drops.
Right?
Yeah.
So but the problem is when we're dealing with these myths, right? We're dealing with a tradition that has been satirized and discarded. And this is part of the problem. We're seeing it always
It's also
through
the
that.
most common tattoo.
I know, right? Right? Well, these themes don't go away, right? This is the other. This is why I also, as much as I'm not a huge fan of like Jung, that idea though of these things appearing in dreams and just being cyclical ideas that are human is just,
It's
it seems so
fascinating.
true. It just
Yeah.
seems so
Well,
true to me.
to me, what it appears as though I'm doing for a living is I'm crunching abstract data,
Yeah.
but it's from some place. It's from some kind of matrix, right?
Mm. Right.
And
Yeah.
so that's part of initiation too, is feeling the pulse of life, feeding you information.
Right. It's wild. It's wild stuff, and this is why I think it's like when you connect to the muses, you're connecting to that font of inspiration, but you're also connecting to the memory, the ancestral lineage, the ancestral dreams, these ideas that are inherent in our DNA.
Yeah.
I still think, like, I believe consciousness is inherent within the matter itself. And so that within our very body that has been gifted to us from our mother, we have the ability to return back to source, because
Yes.
it's literally written in us.
Yeah.
All of that information is there. We
Things
just,
your grandparents learned are in your body.
exactly, we just don't have full way to perceive and access it in our ego,
Well, then,
right?
like you say, the first thing is get quiet. We would
Yeah,
have to first of all get quiet enough to even know what our own thoughts and feelings are, and then body sensations are, where our asshole is in relationship to a hole in the ground, and then
right.
right, and then maybe from that kind of body awareness we could begin to access the information, ancestral information that's in our bodies.
Right, but this is also like when we look at King Numa, when we look at the oracles, what is the first, when we look at the Pythagoreans, what is the first thing that these guys all do? Sit in meditation in the
They get
silence in the
quiet.
woods
They get
or in a
quiet.
cave. You got to
So
in a
that's
cave
pretty
in the
interesting. Then
woods.
how did meditation turn into this thing that we had to import from the East?
Right, this is where it
This is
blows my mind.
after Bibliocide, centuries of
Yeah,
Bibliocide. Christians take over. The first thing they do is they burn down all the libraries.
right.
And but there are fragments, and I did find some translations in print of basic meditation instructions in ancient Greek. We know that this was going on. It's not something that came from China. It had to
Well,
come from China after we burned all the books. That's all that happened.
it's also, it's one of these, okay, one of my biggest loves is poetry, and I'm
Mm,
always looking for people who have this connection to the muse. And one
mm,
of the things that you can find is across history, these
mm.
poets are talking to each other in public, and the greater public is unaware. They're blaspheming, they're invoking the muses, they're doing the same. The tradition never got squashed, it got
Mm.
hidden. Some people brought it in public and then get abused,
And
or
they got real
sometimes you have
cryptic about it.
satanic panics
Yeah,
that then freak out on things,
yeah.
you know but ultimately they never succeed and get rid of the
No,
tradition.
it never went away. People just went
No,
underground. Yeah.
it just went underground. you know
And that it's very interesting that it's still got a boot on its neck. That's
yeah,
interesting because you go to places like Italy or Greece, there's no separation of church and state, y'all.
I
That
know.
that thing never happened there. And so the church has absolute stranglehold on things like archaeology, which is just frightening. And so this is how much power we're talking about. That the people want to hold on to it so bad. One particular interpretation of cosmology, when all you have to do is dig around,
Well,
this is
one
not
of
going
the
to go
things
away.
I think has become so detrimental in our modern Western consciousness is the nation state, and this idea of the homeland and of a people who are bound to a specific place, and that these cultural artifacts are for people own
It's not
certain
human.
groups only, and they're
It's
the
not human.
purview of
And
certain
that's one of the
people
things
only.
I discovered, researching for the book, is that Italy has always been a multicultural, multiracial
Yep,
society. Always.
absolutely.
All you have to do is look at the
Always.
geography to know that that is just port after port after port. And so never Mussolini didn't have a single leg to stand on with his weird little theories.
No,
There's portraits of black Etruscans and white Etruscans and pretty Asiatic looking
Africa's right
Etruscans.
there. Like, give me a
Come on.
break. Give me a break.
Come on.
You know, it's just wild. It's just wild to me. But it's also, it's just human history. Like, nations are supposed, like, countries should be pluralistic. We are pluralistic.
The
You know,
fundamental illusion, and this is what one of the things that dissolves
religion
with the
and race
sense
divides
of the,
us.
that this is initiation is supposed to cure you of this
Right.
grasping, because you start to realize you take, and most people, they just take enough mushrooms and realize you can't own anything. That's ridiculous. That's a complete illusion.
Yeah.
Ridiculous to think you could own a little piece of
Right.
land.
But you say this and people go, but look, we live in a world, right. Like, this is something that actually happened on our little Discord the other day. It's like, I take this for granted, but this is a radical idea. For you and I, we understand this intrinsically. Property is theft.
Oh,
It's a stupid idea. You can't
100%.
own anything.
Yeah,
You can't own things in this world.
it's totally fake.
It doesn't make any sense.
You can't take it
But
with you.
like, we live in a world right now where people, like, try to talk to someone about the end of capitalism. Try to talk to someone about an alternative to democracy, right? Try to talk about, they'll look at you like you're an alien. Like, it's an
This is my
impossibility.
story of my life. What am I doing? I'm like, everybody, you have to change your calendars. And
Right, exactly. Talk to
everybody's
people
like,
about
what the
changing their
hell
calendar.
are you
What?
on about?
Right? But here's the thing, it's all made up. It's all made up. We
Yes,
made
and
it up, and we can take control of it and change it if we so wish.
yes.
Right? But people are so bound up by tradition. And it's like, I'm not even anti-tradition necessarily. I love a lot of tradition, but we have to have that refining, reasoned lens. We can't allow tradition to dictate our future. We have to
No,
use it to
what we have to do
expand.
is dig back. Like, okay, everybody is only 2, 3 generations away from living off the land,
Right,
for starters. So your
right.
animism is not your ancient history.
No,
It could be like right now, you know. And we aren't any different than we were 6,000 years ago.
no.
Even Darwin wasn't trying to say that evolution is a thing that happened that fast. So if you're
Right,
reading ancient history with the lens that these people are really, really different from you, you're gonna miss a whole bunch of stuff. They're
right,
not. They're the same exact
right.
dumbasses
We got
as
all
we
the
are
same
now,
issues.
just with less, industrial pollution.
Right, right, right. But also a lot more violence and a lot less of any kind of it's wild. The past is beautiful and it's ugly, all like our moment,
But it's not that
like
it's
human
not that
history.
far away.
No,
Animism
no,
is not that far
no,
away in our consciousness.
no. Right? We think about this, the written history is such a new thing.
And
People are,
all of
this is,
animism, the fluidity of the self and the lack of ownership is fundamental to understanding
when
animism.
I was doing my degrees, right? So religion studies and anthropology, and I remember taking anthropology and just it was the first thing that broke me of this. In my mind, it's like, you know, our system is the best. Our system, we need to be in this true
Mm,
democratic framework and da
mm.
da 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 da. But when you look at the ancient agriculture, when you look at the ancient history, we lived in these tribal, like, anarchistic societies
Yes,
for like
ever,
250,000 years.
forever. Yeah,
Well before we had any kind of
between
anything.
30 million and 250,000 years ago
Yeah,
is the
right.
beginning, and then that's a long time to not know whether it's 30 million or 250,000 years ago. That's a really big difference, but we don't know because
Right.
stuff just doesn't last that long, and we haven't been able to dig it up. But they just dug up something in South Africa that proves that the proto Homo sapiens is a is an actual thing that you can look
Oh
at.
yeah. Well, and we're constantly revitalizing our whole
Were these
understanding.
people worshiping fire? We don't know, stuff like that. But that's a
Well,
lot
we
more than
know
two hundred fifty
actually.
thousand years ago.
when we're looking at one of the wilder things is, in my religion studies, when we look at early hominid and humanoid religions.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I
you have
personally
this idea.
believe that Neanderthals had
Oh,
civilizations and
they
stuff
absolutely
that
did.
we have not dug up yet. Yeah.
One of the what? Okay, we've found several Neanderthal factories. Okay, they were manufacturing forms of tar to make weapons and to make tools. Like we're talking like intricate systems where they created these like caves where they could then pressurize the air. Like people would die in these, but Neanderthals would survive, and they're making these specialized gums to bind their stone tools. It's wild crap that they're doing. And another thing we found is they had this bone
And
fat
that's around the
processing.
time when we have these weird structures that are built by people
Yeah,
who clearly have a different relationship with geoplasticity.
yeah,
So you're talking about gums and resins and geopolymers.
yeah. And there's so much wild stuff with the Neanderthals that we just don't fully understand. Like another factory we found, this one blows my mind because people still do this, right? Where they were making a form of like what they would do is they would gather all these grains, all these fruits and veg, all this wild grain, and then they would take animal collagen from bones and create trail mix bars that were little bits of fat and meat combined with all of these wild grains and veg. They're literally making trail mix bars. They had a factory to make trail mix bars.
See, this
That they
reminds
could
me of
feed people.
Numa is the kind of guy who would do that, right?
Yeah. This is what the Neanderthals are doing. And we don't think that they had, like, we think they were stupid. We don't think they
No,
have some
no.
form of language. They have complex industry. And we're doubting whether they have language. It blows my mind. And
They're
they clearly
talking
had
to the
religion.
animals and they're talking to the stars.
Right.
Like they're people for sure.
One of the things, okay, so
They
when you
have
look
a
at,
synesthesia.
yes, pemmican is the name for it.
This is
Pemmican.
a
Wild stuff.
synesthesia that is beyond animism, is what I get when I
Yeah.
tune into the Neanderthal with me.
Right. So in anthropology, they talk about this, this is a loose concept, and it's something that is, in the realm of pure, mostly speculation with a little bit of archaeology, but we have what they call the Church of the Skull and the Flame. Anytime you find hominid settlements, you have these caves where there are skulls that
And
are
they're
honored.
making pottery in there too, right?
Yeah,
These are
right,
the pottery folks, like the Kukutani folks.
right.
Okay.
Earliest peoples are they're worshiping fire, they're worshiping the ancestors. What are the earliest Greeks doing? Worshiping fire, worshiping the ancestors. This is the
They're
root
making
of all
pottery.
of our religion. Yeah. And bringing us together because the fire protects you, and you can share and cook your food there, and you can make your pottery there, and you can make these resins to make your thread there.
The Kukutani is pottery and weaving in circular villages for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
Matrilineal, no war
Well,
at all.
and this
And they burned
utilizing
their
the
cities every 4 to 10 years. They would burn the town down and then build it up again.
Next to, everyone always talks about how fire is the greatest human discovery, but I think it is to a certain extent, but we have to match it with its equal match, which is weaving. Because if you look at the greatest invention, I think, like, where fire is a discovery, but the single greatest invention is the thread.
Yeah.
The thread changes all of human existence.
The thread is still how we build a computer, because we can't,
Right?
even our brains are built so much on weaving that's how we make AI.
This is when you go back into the Proto-Germanic, the word woman literally translates to the one who weaves, the person who weaves, whereas the man is the one who has the sword or the weapon.
Yeah.
You have the weapon wielder and the weaver.
And it's inextricable from cosmology. Weaving is inextricable from cosmology.
It was needed for every aspect of our life.
Everybody knew how to weave. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to. And this is what defined, but also, like, that's what defined early gender roles. It wasn't your sex, it was what you did. Were you a hunter or were you a weaver? This is why Artemis is so radical, because she's a hunter, but
and a weaver.
Right?
Yeah.
Or Athena, right? A hunter and a weaver. These are radical things.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting. but we're
But
coming up
it
on
wasn't radical, and that's why they're saying
no,
that Hestia and Artemis are older, because we move east, and that was not that radical. That was the state of things. These were
right.
hunting and weaving populations and herding.
But yeah, and with Hestia, we believe that there's, like when you go to these ancient Pelasgian sites, they don't, it's non-imagistic. It predates the ancestor. The ancestor worship is imagistic, but she is the sacred flame and the hearth itself,
Hmm.
right? That's something totally different. And for whatever reason, the Greeks maintain that she's one of the few non-anthropomorphic gods that they have, right? Like you do get
Hestia,
these,
you mean?
yeah, Hestia,
Yeah,
right? You do get these primordial deities, but they're not building temples to Gaia. You know, they're all over the place. Everyone's home is a temple to Hestia. This is
yes,
this, for a long time in the Greek Hellenistic studies, they always limited Hestia because there isn't a lot of this. She's not talked about in the myths really, and
yeah,
she doesn't have icons.
yeah,
So people were like, okay, well, she's not a big deal. But then when people started really doing the archaeology in people's homes, they were like, every single Greek house
yeah,
has a temple to Hestia.
yeah.
Every single one. Every single Roman house has a
And but
temple to Vesta.
every single Roman house has a temple to Hestia. The hearth is the temple to Hestia, and not far away is a snake in a hole.
Right. Right. Exactly. The
Some
Lares,
form.
right? You got to have
Yeah.
that snake.
This
And there
is
was
your
this thing.
bridge back to what there was before,
Yeah.
which is water.
Yeah.
Before we mastered fire, it was the thing that we got sometimes, but we stayed alive because of water,
Right.
you
Right.
know? And the only time we got fire was when fire happened because of nature. And that was pretty cool. But you can live without fire for millions of years, and we did.
And there's also this thing too, like the Hestia is interesting because she's the virgin, but she's also this mother goddess,
Mhm.
right? And but she's the mother of the spirits and she's the mother of generation,
Mhm.
right? And there's all of this, like she represents all of that the fire is the non-procreative creation for humanity. All of our technological advances come as a result of even the threads and the weaving are a
Yeah.
result of us allowing to use the fire to manipulate grass, you know?
Mhm.
So there's this whole understanding that she's that birth of innovation as
Right.
well, right? It all comes from that spark.
And then there's the contemporary, the seen and the unseen part of the weaving. So
Mm,
that's where you get Larunda is the mother of the invisible twins, the
right,
underground twins, the
right,
dream world twins.
right,
And Rhea Sylvia is the mother of the screaming, crying, nursing real world
right,
twins.
right. It's a dual, it's
Yeah, you
that
can
dual.
just
This is why she's three, right?
mirror
She's got to be
worlds. Yeah,
threes,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's so wild to me, but yeah, like now we've reassessed the position of Hestia in the Greek because for a while there were even people saying, well, she's not really a part of the Olympian pantheon. She gets displaced by Dionysus, but both
Yeah.
her and Dionysus are kind of these, they
Ooh, there was
exist.
a phase too where Artemis was obfuscated, and maybe
Oh
not as
yeah.
Apollo. In real life, you don't get Apollo without Artemis.
Well,
And then if you dig around enough, you miss them because they're out in the woods.
yeah.
But we're finding out through people like Carly and Esco, there's actually more temples to Artemis than anyone
That
else.
was what I was just
It's
gonna say.
just they're
Carla
off
shows
the
us that.
beaten track.
Yeah, there were more Artemis temples. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess Hestia would win because she has every city and every home, but designated specific temples would be Artemis for sure, by far. And the thing with Artemis is that she takes on so many distinct characteristics.
And
Like,
predates her brother. It predates
right.
Apollo. Her incarnation as the twin of Apollo is in
Well,
its
she
later.
also even in the myths, she's born first, right? She's born where it gets wild to me is that there's a weird thing that happens in the Apollo Artemis stories as you go.
Mhm.
In the earliest versions, right? You got Apollo and Artemis and Eleutheria. Eleutheria is this special nursemaid goddess who I think is really this Tacita, Egeria, hidden mother of spirits
This is
energy we're
why,
talking
and this
about,
is why I have to go to Crete because,
right?
and you have to be there to understand it. And this is why the old lady told Carla Crete is calling her daughter's phone. Is
Yeah,
this character was their main
yeah,
lady? That was their main
right.
lady,
This is that
the
Hecate
midwife.
energy, the midwife. But
Yeah,
what ends up happening at some point, Eliswia disappears and
yeah,
Artemis becomes her own midwife. Artemis midwives herself and midwives her brother.
yeah.
And you're just like, what?
Good
When
luck
did
with
this
that.
happen?
Yeah.
You know? When did this happen? And then all of a sudden, though, you go further down the line, and then Artemis starts not even really being a factor in the story, and it's all about Apollo,
Yeah.
you know? And originally, too, like one of the wilder myths, I think I've told you about this one.
Wait, hang on 1 second. 1 second. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll be right back. I'm going to tell our dear friend Leslie here all about Opus and Argi, which is a really interesting story of these Hyperborean maidens who were said to come to they were looking for this magical land, that this floating island, which winds up becoming Delos, right? Because originally in the story of Artemis and Apollo, they can't, you know, the goddess won't allow them to give birth on land.
Sorry.
So you remember the story
But
of
dude, we've been
Artemis?
talking for 3 hours again. We did it again.
Oh God, yeah, we should just wind down here.
Okay, but finish this story.
I'll
Sorry.
finish this story and then we'll end. So with Orpus and Argi, they're these kind of Amazonian-like barbarian women who come from Hyperborea, where Apollo and Artemis are said to be from, the far, far north, right?
Uh-huh.
The far, far north,
Mm.
right? So what ends up happening is that, so in these, they get stricken. So when they did the archaeology, Opus and Argi used to have right at the front of Delos a
Is
huge
it
shrine.
opus the same as ops?
It's similar but not the same
Okay.
because it's Greek versus Latin.
Okay.
You know, Upis, it's Upis, Oupis, Upis and Argi, Arge. I'll send you there's
But
not
it's the
very much
same
on it.
that the feast day is today, right? For
Oh, that's
ops.
for Ops, the
Okay.
Apolia. That's for today, for
Okay.
Rhea. And on to this day, everyone should do this if you can, if it's not too cold. But if you want to worship the goddess in the Roman way, you go and you sit in the earth. Your butt has to touch the grass, and you take your 5 digits, all 5 on both hands, and you stick them in the dirt. And then you're supposed to cry if you can.
Cry
But you
tears with your
cry tears
fingers
of love.
inserted in the earth.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is
wow.
what Demeter does in order to give birth to the Kurites. And the Kurites are those shield bashing spirits that protect Dionysus,
Right.
right? So there's all this kind of wildness here with all these various things. But so with Opus and Argi, there is this weird story about them. They're these Hyperborean maidens, and they are said to have set up the earliest temple on Delos. And they set up the temple to Iyalocha, the midwife.
Right.
And they come specifically looking for Delos because Delos is this magical island that floats. So they travel specifically to go worship Iyalocha. It has nothing to do with Artemis and Apollo. It has nothing to do with the Dioscorides, who, what ends up happening later is Opus and Argi become, their names get changed a bit, but they're entomologically related, and they become the abducted wives of the Dioscorides. Because the Dioscorides, they go off to Hyperborea and they kidnap these women and bring them back to Delos and start the priesthood in the later stories. But in the earliest myth, the women come of their own volition and
They're
set up.
going there on purpose to do this. Nobody is
Yeah,
taking them there.
no one is taking them. And they become respected and they set up this whole lineage. Where it
Right.
gets even wilder is when they did the excavation at Delos, they found evidence of the removal of Opus and Argi. So they found a grave site of them that was still honored at the front of Delos, but then they found a cave that got buried that contained their idols.
They're gonna find this in Delphi too. Nobody killed the Pythia. The,
Right.
the Pythia is the original thing. They
right?
just changed it.
They just changed it. They just hid her, got rid of her, you know?
And the
Well,
same
what
is true in that area in northern Italy where they say that Mary Magdalene came. It was already called Monte Stabilina. It was the
yep.
Sibyl that lived in a cave there for a lot longer ago than Mary Magdalene, and that's where they're placing.
Also with all of this oracular stuff in Apollo, right? He's not the original god of divination. The original god of
Who is?
divination is his grandmother. His
Uh-huh.
grandmother,
Oh
who
yeah.
is the Titan Phoebe. Phoebe.
That's code. If you say that you're a psychic in the Mediterranean, they'll ask you if your grandmother was. If your grandmother was, then you're psychic. If not, then
So Phoebe becomes Phoebus, and Phoebe gets displaced, and all of a sudden Apollo is in charge of the divination. But in the earliest sources, again, it's a female god, right? And it's a female tradition, all this oracular stuff. And it's connected to the snakes and this idea of seeing,
well, so how
right?
do we get back to balance in our modern temple building? Because
So I think,
clearly we've outgrown matriarchal and patriarchal systems.
yeah. So the big thing that I learned from Christine and that I want to do is we need to
Mm.
have the 3 levels of temple. I think we need to do this internally. The problem is that people always focus on one of these elements, and we
Right.
haven't been able to do all 3. The temple has, it's that which is above is the same as that which is below. It has to be in all of these multiple levels, or it's not going to fully develop. So you construct the temple in the heart, you construct the temple in the home, then you construct the temple in community. And when you have all of these, now you have a real community. But this is the thing, we've lost that connection to nature, to ourselves, to each other. So I
You know,
think,
Lourdes and also the church in Saint Marie de la Mer, they are three. There's the cave below, then there's a church here, and then there's another temple on top. And they're so I thought of them as alchemical churches because they have and they have a spring inside them. The
right,
bottom temple is the cave with the spring inside it, and then there's your meeting place that happens here, and then there's another temple for certain rites that is stacked. They're stacked literally one on top of the other.
wow. But there's also complication here that Christine talks about. So there's certain issue when you're trying to establish the temple in the heart. The
Mm.
big issue is breaking free of false conceptions and embracing positivity. You have to love yourself, you have to love life, and you have to be able to connect to the muse and break free of all of this shit that's bound us and distorted our reality. So there has to be a real loving intimacy and reconnection with the body. And this is very difficult for many people. For the next level, for developing the temple in the home, there
Mm.
needs to be physical discipline. There needs to be that act of it's one thing to say you love someone. Now you got to put it into action.
Yeah.
If you love the gods, you
And
will
you gotta
honor them
do
in your
that
home.
now. Yeah.
Now you got to do that now,
Mm.
right? And so this brings it into an even greater level. Once you
Yes.
get to the next level, when you're trying to build the city in reality,
So they're
now,
just saying that this level is more about service.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And then the next one, what is it?
Virtue. That's the
Oh,
path that Numa was on. The only way to build the community temple is you got to be in that path of pure virtue, which is why you got to do the
starts.
other 2 first, because you
So
can't
the
be in that.
road model that would roughly be like the Larrys below and the
Yeah,
Hestia here,
yep,
and then we got the stars.
exactly.
Yeah.
Aphrodite Urania at the top, right? Then or Athena, you can be in that, or Themis, you can be in the justice energy, you can be in that true communal energy once you've established the other 2 temples. Once you have that spark in your heart and you have the discipline in your life,
Right.
then you can actually engage with virtue into the world,
Right.
because you cannot build the community if you're not practicing virtue. It will fall apart, you know? And this is really difficult. Living like you need
Abdullah
easy.
Ocalan, he's a certain kind of leader of the Kurdish people. And he says that
A
all
real citizen.
revolutions have failed because they backburnered feminism. They say,
That
yeah,
is
we'll get to
definitely
that
right.
later. So he says that the enduring revolution, it starts at the home there.
Yeah.
So the equal rights for women in your house. And
Yeah.
then he goes even further to say, if you have a meeting and there's a one expert that's a man, you have to have one expert that's a woman, or you can't call it a you can't call the meeting.
Right.
You have to have as a balanced number of authority figures that are male and female, or you can't even open the door. And I
Well, this
thought that
is
was
just,
such an interesting grassroots level way to remedy it, you know?
it
Because it's
makes me
just if
think
we
of,
don't start with this, with the heart and the home temple, then we can't get to the
right,
greater
exactly.
goals.
This is the thing, I feel like, most of us, and I'm saying this because I struggle with, I think everyone in Western society, and I think all humans to a certain degree, we have to overcome our ego, and we have to come into loving reciprocity with the people around us. And this is something that is very hard in our modern society, where we are constantly in this culture of greed and waste, and where it's
Well, we're
so
still thinking of
easy
the
to
ego
commit
as a
abuse.
solid thing, but the ego
Yeah.
is composed of all the narratives you've been fed,
Yes. Right.
actually. It's
Right.
not. That's how when
It's
it
not a
shatters,
solid
you
thing.
realize it's not.
Everything is
It was
changing.
never your truth self.
No,
It's
never your
just a
truth
collection of mores and inhibitions that you accumulated over
experience.
time.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. And as such, the ego is malleable. But
Mm.
we're living in this kind of diseased society, right? Which has lost, what we've seen is a complete degradation of community, and a replacing community with further narcissistic behavior, with therapy talk, with
And
this,
a bunch of fairy tales. Yeah.
exactly, with all of this. If I just work harder and if I empower myself, then everything will be okay. But how can you solve the problem on your own if you don't have, like this? We, I do believe that ultimately we all need to deal with our own shit, but that's 25% of the problem. We exist as a community.
Yeah.
If we're not in connection with, I look around and it's like, I don't know my neighbors. Don't know my neighbors. I don't know where my water comes from. I don't know where my food comes from. I don't know the state of the earth that I
Knowing where
live
your
on.
water comes from is a big deal. And
Right?
when I had my energy work school that I gifted to my students a couple of years ago, so I could focus on new stuff, um, that I would have them get a photo of the actual reservoir where your tap water comes from and stick the photo by the tap, because you don't have to walk there anymore, but your water that comes out of the tap is from a person, and it's that reservoir there, and it has a personality and looks different in the different seasons, and so if you can just see a picture of that next to your tap,
Right.
you actually can have a visceral relationship with the land that we are currently unaware that we're living off, apparently.
This is, I remember a while back I met this guy from South Africa, and he was talking to me about how he went on one of those ibogaine ceremonies, but he did it the real way, where they bury you in a grave. And when he was buried, he saw his ancestors.
Mm,
And that's the answer. He went to them and he goes, I don't know what to do with my life. I'm anxious. I don't have purpose. I'm uncertain of everything. And the ancestors said, slow down. Where's your water come from?
exactly.
And he goes, I don't know. And he
Yeah.
goes, well, where's your food come from? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
Find that out. And that's all they said
This
to
then
him.
this is the training that the vessels throw Numa into immediately.
Right.
He has to roll up his sleeves and get in the kitchen.
Right. He's got to become a cook. He's got to become a hearth witch, right? He's got to learn how to do all that stuff. Like,
and
part of the
he's
reason
and
why the
he's
Romans were
gonna be
shocked is,
hunting and fishing
right,
and foraging and putting it all together and cooking it and watching it be gone in 2 seconds.
right. Part of the reason why they're all shocked is because why is this single man capable of doing all this? How does he know all this women's work?
because he was
right?
trained by the
Right?
vessels. Yeah.
Exactly. But like we know that, but the Romans, that would have seemed magical to them, right?
Yeah, yeah, especially because he had to be on the down low because the vessels were in hiding.
Yeah. 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 It's all such wild stuff. But we're coming up here now to 3 hours and 20 minutes. We've been going for so long. But I
We
always
gotta
just
go.
love chatting with you. So we always have
It's
so much
so
fun.
fun. Yeah.
So we will for sure be doing this again soon. And if people enjoy our ramblings and the random topics that we get
I would
to,
like to talk about building the temple in terms of dance and music. There are certain
right.
rhythms that call certain elements.
Oh,
There are
yeah.
strings of the lyre that belong to different gods. And there are also group body movements that can either promote or not promote community. And I
Oh,
think those things are so fascinating.
I so resonate with this, because my my big one of my big things, one of the first real magical things and the most magical thing that's ever really happened to me is my ability to do this, right? In some ways, this, science can explain this. I'm neurodivergent. This
Right.
is a STEM,
Yes.
but this also has taken me around the world. I've got to perform
Oh,
on
dude,
national
from a certain point of
television.
view, jazz is a STEM, right?
Right, and the thing is that for me it's been a conversation with the muse the entire time. I enter into flow states. This is what has made me a real spiritual person, is being able to have this personal musical magical practice. That's what I'm doing all the time by myself. you
Yeah.
know mo- you know Eventually what I decided was I am not going to share that percussion with the world. It's not for you, it's for the gods, and this is
It's
something for
geomancy.
me, you know,
I would recognize it as geomancy.
right? And it's a profound, beautiful thing, but music will move you. Music will take you to places faster than anything else, like people like to yell about drugs. Drugs lead to a lot of fear and anxiety.
And,
Music will
and
always
it's
show you
very
this.
complex with the dosage. You have to know
You got to
yourself.
know
You
your
have to
body.
have
You
a
got to
drug native
really know
voice
your
that
body.
knows you and has ethics, and actually, I think most people can get there without it if the
Right.
music is good enough and there's enough of the other elements like sleep depth and whatever.
Some people are trauma, or there's always going to be, you dealing with the almond work. I recognize this because, like, personally, I'm very much I'm in that more feminine approach. I want to spread love and positivity. I want to hold your hand through the process, and I want to show you as many perspectives as possible so I ease you into this experience where
Well, it
someone
depends.
like Ammon wants to come and slap you in the
The
face,
kingmaker initiation has to kick your ass on
Yeah,
every dimension.
yeah. There's a
You
there's a
must
place
be
for both of them.
flayed if you want
Yeah,
to be the king, right?
yeah, that's true.
But
You wanna be a king?
that's a big deal that only very few people go through, right?
Right, right.
Most of us are not training to be a war general or anything like that. But
This is the
sure,
thing.
if you want to be Doctors Without Borders and you want to be an ER doctor, if you want to be a hooker, for example, you are going to need to be trained to stay lucid in some very extreme states, like a helicopter pilot.
I
You know,
always think about it, they're just all people are capable of experiencing the essence of reality if you're in a body, you know? And I fundamentally believe this. And it's just that some of us need different ways in which to wake up. The
yeah.
the propaganda is deep, the spooks are deep. I
We
often
all
think
have
about,
different ways of writing a poem. Muse
right.
possession doesn't look the same in every
No,
house. Somebody needs to be alone in silence to write, and somebody else can only write in the middle of a train station. And the muses, they assess the apparatus, the instrument that is being donated to them, and they will tell you what you
right.
need to do to promote creative flow.
There's some people who need to be told that they're stupid before they recognize that they're being stupid. And
And
there's some
there are
people, if
some
you
people who
said that,
that will cripple them.
exactly, if you said that to someone else, you would ruin them. And
Yes.
it's like, this is the reality of humanity. We're such a complicated, varied experience. I often think too about, like, the Buddha stories. One of my favorite Buddha stories is at the deer park, and he's giving this sermon, and it's a really technological sermon of talking about high philosophy, and all of his students are there, and they're all scribbling it down. And there's this one young student who's just breaks into tears,
Uh,
just tosses his book on the ground and is crying.
yeah.
And so the Buddha comes up to him and goes, "What's the matter?" And he goes, "I don't understand any of it. This
Uh,
is nonsense to me. I'm struggling. I don't think I'll ever achieve enlightenment." The Buddha takes him into the water, grabs a water lily, takes it over to him, opens up his hand, the water lily unfurls, and the young man achieves enlightenment.
yeah.
He recognized the essence of the philosophy in the literal experience of the world. And he just needed someone to show him it,
Yeah.
right? For some people, like personally, I do well in that study. Give me the books and the philosophy. But another person, it would not make sense to them.
No.
But if you showed them the essence of what you're saying, it may just click, you know? And this is the thing. We have to allow for all of these varied degrees of human experience. But that's why also where it gets so complicated. This is what
He
makes a good
also
group.
saw an empty cup.
Right. An empty cup?
Yeah, he saw an empty cup and he filled it.
Right.
The
Well, you see,
the kid knew that he didn't know, and
right.
so he was it had a much bigger space to fill with the enlightenment than the
That's such a
kids
good
who think
point.
they're understanding what's going on.
By admitting his ignorance, by crying out in
It's in a
exasperation,
state
he
of
primed
longing, which
himself.
is primed to receive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he primed himself for that initiation, which is
His
why the Buddha
his
took him into the water.
Parvati sitting there crying with longing. Why are you not coming to me? Knowledge. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff, right?
Beautiful.
You know, it's a beautiful thing. And this is the thing. These kind of perspective changing moments can come in so many different ways,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And the
And
thing
that's
is
one
we
of
have
the
to,
failings I believe in the patriarchal Western system is believing that wisdom per forza comes from suffering. Wisdom comes
yeah,
from every damn thing.
yeah.
Wisdom comes from tickling your 2 year old and stepping on Legos in the middle of the night.
Well,
You
you
know?
know what it is that the Greek tradition tells us this. Zeus bestows wisdom through suffering. This is his purview. That's how the father war god
You're gonna
acts.
get enough suffering, you don't need to go looking for more.
Now, if you want that kind of wisdom, go
You dig
ask
it,
Zeus. But
knock yourself
personally, I
out.
don't need
Yeah.
that kind of wisdom, right?
And some people can't. Like Numa, he couldn't take it in. He was not gonna take it from male teachers. He had no skin, everything hurt, and he had to run off in a sheepskin. And
Well,
he
you know,
sought out only female company for the whole time he was out. See, he was running from patriarchy. He was a
well, and
refugee. He was a
his
refugee
story,
from
yeah,
masculinity, you know.
yeah, his story is right. Look, it's wild because he tried to abandon society. You know,
Yeah,
in reality, he tried
yeah,
to leave the world behind.
yeah.
If he had his own way, he would have lived that monastic life in the grove for forever. He
Yeah.
never would have became a king.
Yeah.
But the people dragged him out of it, kicking and screaming.
But in
And
the
the wild thing is that
meantime,
he
he
ran.
prepared himself to be king, and his
Yeah,
initiators took him through the king making ritual. In the
yeah,
meantime, he
yeah.
wasn't running so far that he was like, no, I'm just gonna be a doofus. You know, he was preparing.
Well, you know what it is with Numa is that he committed to the muse. He married his muse, and she told him to become king. That was it. You know,
Some things are written, other things we pick, and choose. Yeah.
right, right, right.
All right,
Okay,
we
well,
better shut up. We're
yeah,
boring everyone. All right.
yeah, yeah. We'll never end. All right. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. This was really, really, really beautiful. Always enjoy our chats. And we'll set up another one soon. So, everyone, stay tuned. We'll be back again. Much love and
That's
enjoy
you.
your evening. Yo,
Okay.
Saturnalia. Happy Opalia. See you again later. Bye.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Oh, Leslie, did you want to
Yes.
promote yourself one final time and your
All
spiritual
right.
mediumship?
I'll just give you my email address. It's leslie dot selene at yahoo.com. I do private sessions and I do ghost busting and I do astrology. but mostly we just do private sessions and we move some energy. We talk to some spirits, and that's that. I did start spent 10 years building this school, which I gave to my students, and that's for energy healing. If that's your thing, and I don't get anything from it anymore. That it's all theirs.
Wild stuff. But here's the thing, Leslie's the real deal. The real deal. I don't just say that lightly. So please reach out to her if you have an interest. Trust your intuition. All right. Much love to you guys. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, support
Ciao.
Leslie. We'll talk again soon. Bye, Leslie. Much love, everyone. Peace.